Good evening. The regular meeting for the Annapolis City Council on Monday, July the 11th will be called to order at 7:05 p.m. At this time, would everyone willing and able please stand for the invocation given by Alderwoman Finlayson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dear Heavenly Father, I come to you thanking you and praising you for the great gifts of our city. Lord, I ask you to lift up in prayer our country this evening for the tragedies that have struck many of our cities. Lord, take special care of the families of those who have been lost in Minnesota and Baton Rouge and Dallas, Texas, and now Michigan, and all of those who have been lost unnecessarily. Bring us to a place of peace. Lord, I lift up prayer for our men and women in blue, who are the ones who are running into the danger as everyone else runs away. Keep them safe so that they don't fall at the hands of a sick mind. I pray for our African American men, our fathers, our brothers, our sons, and our cousins, who walk this earth every day, not knowing what their fate may be. Lord, I lift up prayers for all who have come to speak this evening. Let us all understand that disparaging one another lifts up no one. Lord, I lift up prayers for our legislative body. I pray during these turbulent times for your guidance in making laws that are just for all people, regardless of party, of race, gender, or socioeconomic status. Help us to end the desperate treatment between the haves and the have-nots. Let us not perpetuate the tale of two cities. Lord, help us to keep things in perspective. We understand that a basketball court is a tool for entertainment and serves to keep some young people on the straight and narrow. But Lord, help us to understand that adequate housing, decent jobs, and transportation are vital for survival in our society today. Dr. Martin Luther King, a personal friend of my father's, once said, "The ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but the silence that is led by the good people." Let us not be silent, but to use our legislative powers to make laws that will eliminate disparities, racial and social. Help us to continue to be the voice of the voiceless. Teach us the spirit and value of cooperation and compromise. Lord, grant us the gifts of wisdom, justice, counsel, and fortitude that will result in a strong and healthy community. A community that is filled with mutual understanding, with care and concern for our neighbors, with the ability and the willingness to accept all differences as cultural and social wealth, which enriches us all. I pray that we will be motivated by your hand. These things I ask in your name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panladies.
Present.
Alderman Budge. Here. Alderman Payon. Present. Alderwoman Kendall Charles. Present. Alderwoman Finlayson.
Present.
Alderman Littman. Alderman Kirby. Present. Alderman Pfeiffer. Alderman Arnett.
Present. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the first item on our agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
At this time, I would entertain a motion to amend the agenda to add O3615, adequate public facilities, on second reader. So moved. Is there a second? Any discussion? Alderman Budge.
Mr. Mayor, I have communicated to my fellow council members, and I would like to say to the public as well, that adding this very impactful legislation to our agenda without notice to the public is potentially a tremendous disservice to the public and to the transparency that we expect of this council. We have discussed online postponing this debate on the legislation to the next council meeting, and it is only in the interest of doing so that I will entertain adding this to the agenda.
Alderman Kirby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as Alderman Budge has stated, I think that since it wasn't on the agenda, it's a hot button issue. I concur that to add it to the agenda tonight for the purposes of postponement only until a later meeting.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is ID 300-16, which is the Martha Wood Leadership Award to Michael Molden Sr., Anne Arundel County Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families.
Well, this evening I'm going to read a citation we have for Mr. Michael Molden Sr. On behalf of the citizens of the City of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you this City Council citation in recognition of being the 65th recipient of the prestigious Martha Wood Leadership Award, showcasing many years of dedicated service to our area youth. We applaud the fact that you've created a wide variety of activities to enhance the quality of life for our community and our youth. We recognize your ongoing efforts through your coaching expertise, mentoring, and motivational encouragement to the many youth of the City of Annapolis. For your consistent and successful effort in serving the youth of the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis, we applaud your determination and honor you tonight, given under our hands in the Great Seal of the City of Annapolis on this 11th day of July, 2016. And it's signed by myself and all the members on the council. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you to the City of Annapolis and to the Housing Authority for Prestige Award. And hopefully Martha Woods, who's looking down, see that a person, a coach, a mentor, has done what she laid before and that other people follow behind. But I think one thing I would like to say is that when it comes to, I may not be a good husband or a great husband. I may not be a great son. I may not be a great dad or a very good uncle or a very good cousin or a very good brother. But I can tell you now, every one of my family and friends and cousins can tell you, I'm true to the kids. When that song says, I believe the children are our future, I believe it. I believed it then and I still believe it now. So the last thing I like to say is I tell the kids, all the kids I talk to, I tell them this, you have to develop your own story. You do that. Let other people write it, but you develop it. Do the good things when nobody else is looking and watch what happens. And if there's anything I can take back to the community today to tell the kids, I have an award that proved somebody else wrote a story about me and I didn't have to say a word. Thank you for the award. Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, do I have a mic on? I don't really need it, I'm loud. But I just wanted to say that Mr. Molden and some of his coaches in the audience tonight just coached the Haka Hurricane 10 and under age group to the championship in the last 2 weeks.
Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item on the agenda is reports by committee and comments by the general public, followed by an update from the mayor.
Is there any alderperson that would like to present a report? Alderman Budge?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of the public and the council. The Transportation Committee has not met since our last council meeting. However, we will be meeting this upcoming a week from Tuesday on the 19th here in these chambers at 6:30, and we'll be discussing a couple of transportation bills that are before us tonight on public hearing that a number of you are here to comment on. And if you wish to participate further in the discussion, you're welcome to attend the Transportation Committee meeting as we analyze these bills further. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Lippman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Environmental Matters Committee will meet on July 21st at 1:30 p.m. The Environmental Matters Committee will meet on July 21st at 1:30. I expect that the main purpose of that committee will be to begin the review of the Forest Conservation Act, which will include review and comments that we hear tonight. Thank you.
Alderman Arnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Rules and City Government Committee will be meeting tomorrow, and we have quite an agenda, much of it following up from tonight's meeting. Traffic impact analysis, Forest Conservation Act, election code updates, and the 4 resolutions on the annexation properties. That'll be 4 o'clock here tomorrow. I think there's going to be a lot of very important information shared with us, and we certainly encourage people who care about all of these issues to come. I think there's something wrong with the volume here.
It's the fan.
I can't even hear the city attorney.
Should I shut that off?
It's the fan.
Is there any other alderperson? Alderman Payan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Economic Matters Committee will have a joint meeting with the Rules and City Government Committee on Thursday, the 14th at 3 o'clock right here in the council chambers. And for the record, I don't need no stinking microphone to be heard.
Anyone else? All right. We're going to now move on to comments by the general public. So during comments by the general public, you can talk about anything that's not already scheduled for a public hearing. So if you came here tonight to talk about the traffic impact analysis, the Forest Conservation Act, election code updates, forest conservation fine and fees, any of the 4 annexations, those public hearings will be immediately following this. First 3 people signed up to speak are Michael Burback, apologize for that, Robert Eads, and Josh Greenfield.
Good evening, Mike Burlbaugh,
There you go.
433 Burnside Street. I'm a resident of Eastport, and I'm also a residential developer. And I wanted to talk to you specifically about the APFO issue, which I understand has been added to the agenda. I would first urge you to postpone that for a couple of weeks, which it's a very complex and very impactful legislation, and it would be extremely important to have a couple more weeks to vet any issues related to it. As you consider that ordinance, I would like to suggest 2 elements that you focus on and give some weight to, specifically as it relates to Annapolis High School. And I would suggest that the high school should be removed from the APFO calculations due to the minimal impact new home development in the city has on Annapolis High School. And I'll give you an example. I went back to 2012 and looked at all the new home communities that have been selling, looked at the total number of settlements from 2012 until now, 136 settlements. And that's a combination of single-family detached and townhomes. Based on the county pupil generation factor, which they just published an updated study in the 2016 master plan, that calculates to 9 high school students over the past 4.5 years. Over that same time period, the Annapolis High School enrollment increased by 396 students. So it was a 396 students increase, only 9 of which are attributable to new home development in the city. That's 2% of the problem. And I would suggest that is minimal impact. The second issue I'd like you to consider as you're looking at that ordinance is facility utilization. And this is a little bit more of a complex moving puzzle, but there is a reality, particularly as it relates to the elementary schools, that there is existing capacity in certain schools and overcapacity in other schools in adjacent districts. I'll give you an example. Georgetown East Elementary, which just recently had a 110-seat addition added to it, now has 300 vacant seats. And then we all know Tyler Heights has 150 empty seats. And I'm not suggesting that this would be a drive for redistricting, but what I am suggesting is for purposes of APFO calculation, there are empty seats that are not being utilized for one reason or another. And I would ask you to weigh that in potentially looking at an ordinance that could shut down the new home building industry in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. I was here my name is Robert Eaves. I live at 32 Pleasant Street, Annapolis, Maryland. I had three quick issues I wanted to go by, but I think the city manager, I showed him pictures I was talking about when they was talking about putting a dumpster on Pleasant Street, how it would affect the homeowners. I have some pictures. I'm not going to take up a whole lot of time, but it's trash piled all up. Cats. I've already seen 2 rats. 2 rats. And I took to the city manager. I think he'll handle that, so I'm going to leave that part alone. Second, I'm here to ask the city council. Me and Mr. Payon, we usually click and get things done real good here, but we've been missing each other some kind of way. There's an organization, a non-profit organization called the Old Fourth Ward Family Reunion Committee. We're planning a big gala on September the 17th, which will be free for children, adults, and families. We would like to use the Stanton Center in that section of West Washington Street in front of the Stanton Center. And when I say use the Stanton Center, we're talking about the inner part and the kitchen, because we will be serving food for the seniors and the hot dogs, hamburgers for the children with drinks. And I'm here to ask the city council to allow us to waive the fees, since we are a non-profit organization, to use that building on September the 17th from approximately noon till about 5 o'clock. We'll start cleaning up 6 o'clock. We'll be out of there. And that's the second thing. And my last thing I want to bring to the city council, it's not nothing new, but the taxi cab drivers asked me as president of the Taxi Cab Drivers Association, Uber killing us. Y'all got to do something about Uber. They are now setting in all the spots that the cabs used to set in, that legally they weren't marked as cab spots, but they never bothered us because there's only actually 2 spots legally downtown that says taxi cab. So we usually use the loading zones that the businesses use after hours because they're not being used. We were using those to set in and get there, but now Uber, they're coming in. Delaware, I've seen Jersey, seen DC, and they're just setting downtown, taking out business. I will say this once again. The taxi cab industry is not regulated by the state of Maryland. So I don't understand how Annapolis City keeps saying that they got to go by state rules when they're not regulated by the state. No, we cannot stop Uber from bringing people into a city of Annapolis. But we can do like the airports, if you've been watching the news across the country. They're stopping them from picking up there. And this is what I'm saying to the city, all the person. We need legislation. You need to stop the Uber from coming and picking up. We're paying all these fees. The state has tripled insurance for taxi cabs. Tripled, not just gone up, tripled. And we're not making the money to pay our fees and take care of our families and do the things we need. We need the city council to step up. We need y'all to stop Uber from picking up here. It's just getting outrageous. It's just getting ridiculous. The cabs aren't making any money. And for them to now come in and sit in our cab spots in our areas, we just feel that that's unfair. We feel that the city's doing nothing to protect us. I mean, what are y'all, scared of these gangsters or what? You know, because they just bullying their way in and gangstering their way in and doing what they want. And city's sitting back saying, okay, we can get 25 cents a trip. Figure out going to BWI, it costs $55, $60. How many quarters you gonna get to get paid for that one trip? And we paying all the money and they're not paying anything. Thank you.
Alderwoman Hendo Charles.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Eads, concerning your second request for the Old Fourth Ward family reunion, just make sure that you get your paperwork into the city so that everything can be done by the September 17th. We're in the summer months, and you know, oftentimes we have vacations, but we want to make sure that you get your paperwork in soon, if you haven't already, to make sure that date is secure and everything's taken care of.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Eads, would you propose that we stop regulating taxis completely?
Stop regulating? No, I wouldn't. Because there'll be some people who would mess. Can you excuse me? There would be some people. It sounds good, but I'll be honest. There'd be some people who would mess that up. There would be some people who would totally mess that up. Being regulated, and it sets the structure and the rules that we got to go by and follow. If you say no regulation at all, we got people already doing crazy things in the cabs. And if they don't have nobody to answer to, I think it would ruin the cab industry. We're not asking you to not have regulations for us. We're asking you to get rid of Uber because they have no regulations, no policies, no rules, and they're taking better than two-thirds, half of our business or better.
The state has granted them permission to do business here.
Yeah, but the city of Annapolis taxi cab industry is not regulated by the state. So the state cannot tell us what to do.
Well, that's why I asked you if you would like for us to not regulate them.
Not regulate? You said to not regulate the cabs?
Yeah. Because we can't regulate. We've already done what the state has allowed us to do with Uber.
You mean tell me you can't bar Uber out? How is it all these other states and cities and airports can bar Uber out and you telling me that y'all can't do that?
Our state has legislated that they are allowed to do business in the state.
Okay.
I mean, maybe Mr. Elson can clarify this, but that's my understanding, and that we can charge them the meager 25-cent fare.
As far as I know, they're authorized to do business in the state of Maryland.
Exactly.
Well, okay, what difference does it make if the city is not regulated? The taxi cab industry in the city of Annapolis is not regulated by the state.
That's why I asked you if you would like
just
to
let
see
us run wild. We'd rather not have to pay y'all any fees. We'd rather not have to do anything and let us have the cab industry and let us monitor and do it ourselves. And I'll step forward, since I'm the president of the Taxi Cab Drivers Association, I'll monitor those cabs, ones, and along with some other people that don't want to abide by any type of rules and regulations. If y'all want to just let us go, yeah, we would love that.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to suggest that we create a work group to look at this, to see what options there are that are within the parameters of the state, and get some of Mr. Eads' members on the committee and try to talk through to come to a resolution.
Yeah, and one last thing, I would ask the city council, those spots that loading zones that not used in the evening and in the night, could you turn those in the cab stands at a certain hour? After most of the loading is finished by 3 o'clock in the evening, in the afternoon. If you would take those and put some signs there and said taxi cab stands, then that would stop Ubers from coming in. I mean, they're coming far as Delaware taking our money out of here. And that's on a regular. They're coming from D.C., that's on a regular.
So maybe that could be on the agenda for the committee to look at the possibility of doing that.
Evening, Josh Greenfeld with the Maryland Building Industry Association. We represent residential home builders and developers like Mr. Grobal and many of other members who you've spoken to. Mr. Mayor, sure, a quick clarification. You guys added APF to the agenda. Did you also agree to postpone it, or you have not done that? We couldn't really hear back there.
The reason we added it is the council, a couple meetings back, added to a
Right.
date certain. So if we didn't vote on it tonight to postpone, it would die. So yes, I believe it's the intention of this council to postpone it to next
I didn't
week.
know if you had done that yet. We couldn't really hear very
Sure.
well from the back. Thank you.
We're about to get to that.
Excellent, excellent. Well then, I'm just here to thank you guys for working on this. There's been a ton of email and phone activity from many of the aldermen and many of my members who are all sitting here. And I think we're pretty close to coalescing around some amendments that we can all agree upon that hopefully will be a good outcome for the city, for the development community, for the citizens, regarding the high school, minimum lots, what year we apply the test. We're very close. I think in 2 weeks we can really get down to business and get it done. So I just want to thank you guys for your attention to this matter, and look forward to finishing this up and getting it over with after about a year. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three people signed up to speak: Sarah Elfreth, Philip Dales, and Robert Ronas.
Would you ask him to tell them to speak into the mic? Mr. Mayor, could you ask the speakers to speak into the mic? We have this air conditioning here, and we're not hearing what is being said.
Is that better?
If everyone could speak louder.
Better? No?
Maybe we need a different mic there.
I can be loud. Good evening. My name is Sarah Elfreth. I reside at 124 Prince George Street. I'm here on behalf of the Ward 1 Residents Association. We just wanted to thank the Annapolis Police Department for their continued support of Ward 1, and particularly Corporal Amy McGuez for her constant communication with Ward 1 and support. Just come bearing thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Philip Dales from 200 Westgate Circle. I wanted to make a few comments about the APF, understanding that is the intent of the council to postpone. I wanted to reemphasize how low the development numbers have been for residential development. Mr. Brobaugh touched on this, but I think it's a lot to understand that over the last 4 years, all the residential development we've had have generated less than 20 students to our elementary schools. So that's 6 to Eastport, 7 to Mills Parole, 4 to Annapolis Elementary, and 1.8 or less than 2 to Germantown. And at the high school, we've had less than 9 generated by the number of residential units that have been built in this city since 2012. Over the last 4 years, we've had only 35 total students generated by the numbers of the residential units that have been built. So with that in mind, I'd say it still makes sense to have an APF that includes the consideration of school capacity and that discourages or limits development in some areas of the city where the schools are overcrowded, but that allows us to have residential development occur in other parts of the city where the schools are not as crowded. With that in mind, I'd say that we need to be focused on limiting all the unintended consequences of a school APF. So the devil's really in the details here. And I think it's important for the council to consider the possibility or the option of excluding Annapolis High from the APF test simply because the city of Annapolis is a single high school jurisdiction, and demographics in a city environment where there's a high residential density can change very quickly, and a projection as to the enrollment at Annapolis High could 1 year change so that we would be creating a residential development moratorium. And that would have unintended consequences for the economic prospects of the city and for our housing policy. So if we can consider that and we can fix some of the mechanical problems with the currently proposed APF and its leading amendments, I think we could have a really good ordinance here that would make a lot of sense in at least preventing the risk that new residential development could add to a problem that we've seen, but which we are pretty sure is not being caused by new residential development, given how low those numbers have been, as I pointed out at the beginning of my comment. So thank you very much for your consideration over the next 2 weeks, and I hope I'm very confident we can get something ironed out that works well.
Lieutenant Robert Beans.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant Robert Beans. I live 105 Green Valley Road, Arnold, Maryland. 35 years with the Annapolis Police Department. I'm here more or less supporting Resolution 916 that was introduced by Alderman Kirby concerning public safety employees' funeral representation. I strongly support this particular resolution, obviously reasons, because I attend several funerals of police officers, and there were no representation from the police department. And I would certainly like to see this resolution passed. And for those who have a problem with it, remember the 37th President of the United States, Richard Nixon. He got full honors for his service. Thank you.
That was the last person signed up to speak. If you would like to address the council, please come forward. Now is your opportunity. Seeing no motion, I declare the comments by the general public closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, the next item is an update from the mayor.
Just wanted to give everybody a quick update on some things that have been going on. We had a meeting with our lobbies today that were very productive. For those of you that remember, we got $1 million from the governor last year for flood mitigation, and it's our hope to increase the pilot program from $367,000 to $1 million. We also have a number of other initiatives we're working with them. We met with the Spa Creek Conservancy, and they were giving us an update on all the environmental projects they're doing, which I'll have a full report on at the next meeting, which is fantastic, going into the pipeline. That's my update.
Okay. All right, Mr. Mayor, next on the agenda is an appointment. In this case, it's an appointment to the Transportation Board, Mr. Arjen van Andel.
Is there a motion to approve AP 416, the appointment of Arjan van Andel to the Transportation Board?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor, next is the consent calendar. There are 2 items on that part of the agenda.
I don't think that was I can't.
Move approval of the consent calendar.
Right.
Madam City Clerk,
Yeah.
or during all our personnel, would you take anything off? Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panelides,
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson,
Sheila.
We're voting to approve the consent calendar.
Consent calendar. That's my question. Aye.
Alderman Littman,
Aye.
Alderman Kirby, Alderman Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Alderman Arnett,
Aye.
Alderman Budge,
Aye.
Alderman Payon,
Aye.
Alderwoman Pendel Charles.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, next on the agenda are first readers. The first is O2816 involving the Annapolis Arts District, a lease agreement to allow the Annapolis Arts District office to
What happened to public hearings? What happened to public hearings?
oh, I have it.
No, because these are all part of the consent calendar.
So, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, next on the agenda is public hearings.
All right. If you came forward to testify on O1916, the traffic impact analysis, nobody signed up in advance to speak. If you'd like to address the council, now is your opportunity. Seeing no motion in the chambers, I declare the public hearing on got under the gun. There you go. Good to see you again, Ms. Norman.
Trample my fellow attendees here. Sharon Norman, 77 Napa I hope that you can implement those quickly for a number of projects around town and make it much safer to navigate around Forest Drive. I especially hope you will be implementing the traffic needs of the Annapolis Neck Road subdivision, Parkside Preserve, that's supposed to have all its amenities put in before the permits are finalized on that. Especially the traffic light at Forest Drive and Annapolis Neck Road. I have a new 16-year-old son with a learner's permit, and that intersection is extremely hazardous and will shut down the entire peninsula for 4 hours, like we've had multiple times, if we have more accidents and more loss of life and injury there. So please do everything you can to get the traffic improvements installed prior to development of any properties. And thank you for the traffic studies.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on O-1916 closed. I accept into the record a memorandum to the Annapolis City Council from the Planning Department dated 7/7/16 and from Pete Gutwald, Director of Planning and Zoning, dated 5/23/16. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, next is a public hearing on O-2216, which is the city's proposed Forest Conservation Act.
The first three people signed up to speak are Josh Greenfield, Rick Kissel, and Philip Dales.
Evening again, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Josh Greenfield, Maryland Building Industry Association. Again, we represent home builders. Oh, still can't hear me? Sorry. Josh Greenfield, Maryland Building Industry Association. We represent home builders and developers around the state and in Annapolis. And, you know, we're just getting to work on this bill, just starting to sink our teeth into it. We'll be, next Thursday at the work session in the committee with Mr. Budge.
Tomorrow.
And we are, you know, we agree that the city does finally need an FCA ordinance. We hope that it's reasonable and as close to the model state ordinance as possible. We've got a number of, you know, early concerns regarding definitions of the rebuttable presumption and some of the other definitions that are listed in there and words sort of used willy-nilly interchangeably, but I think we can hammer that out, and we're just, you know, ready to work on it and get it done. That's all. Thanks.
What time is Environmental Matters on Thursday? Oh, the 21st.
My name is Rick Kissel. I live at 717 Warren Drive, Annapolis, Maryland, 21403. I'm speaking on behalf of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. I am a vice chair of that commission and have just handed out the topics that I'm going to talk about. First of all, the Environmental Commission thanks you, Mr. Mayor and City Council, for recognizing the importance of the remaining forest in the city of Annapolis and the important service that it provides, such as clearing the air and water, providing habitat for birds and wildlife, moderating temperatures, and providing opportunities for recreation and calmness. We were disappointed that the city did not pass Alderman Littman's prior FCA bill, O-3214, nor was the version recommended by the Planning Commission passed. The Planning Commission has again suggested amendments, and the AEC urges the Council to adopt those. The AEC urges the Council to include the following amendments. among others. Adopt the Planning Commission recommendation. Require a public hearing when or before the first forest conservation plan is submitted. When development plans are the easiest to amend. In other words, don't wait until the final plat is approved. Variances should also require a public hearing. Allow public appeals of the final forest conservation plan determination before grading and other site disturbances are permitted. Require a very high bar to clear priority forest. This should not include decreased economic gain as a reason. The, quote, unwarranted hardship definition should meet the state standard for unwarranted hardship. Another item, removed trees should be replanted acre per acre. Another, require a variance to remove all live trees with greater than 24-inch circumference. I guess that's diameter. Sorry about that. The final item, changes to the Forest Conservation Technical Manual should be subject to review by the Environmental Commission and by the Environmental Matters Committee. And lastly, we urge you, the Annapolis Environmental Commission urges you, do not use fear of DNR's possible disapproval of a no net loss as an excuse not to pass the best bill for our city. The state provides minimum standards, but local jurisdictions, like the city of Annapolis, can adopt more stringent measures, as you know, from the General Attorney's opinion on this matter. Thank you very much.
Alderman Lippman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Kissel, for coming tonight. I have just a brief question, and then frankly, I hope that you attend the Environmental Matters Committee meeting on July 21st so we can have a longer conversation. My quick question is, some of the AEC recommendations are inconsistent. So the Planning Commission recommendations, the Planning Commission does not endorse having a separate right of appeal, but the AEC does. And you're advocating following the Planning Commission, but also advocating for a separate right of appeal.
I'm sorry, yes, yes, it doesn't, we're not saying follow the entire full Planning Commission. I think there's just an omission on that aspect.
Okay.
But yes, we will go by this.
Okay. I appreciate your attendance tonight and your comments, and like I said, I look forward to a longer discussion on July 21st.
Okay, thank you very much.
Evening again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Again, on this ordinance, I'd like to encourage the council to adopt the ordinance detailing a forest conservation program. But I think it's important to focus on the right goals as we consider the items that have been described by the speakers already. And I don't want to complicate things by using the expression, don't lose sight of the forest for the trees. But really, if you think about the big picture, when you consider the urban environment we're in, it's important to know what the right goals are and to understand whether a citywide canopy goal or a protection of every single tree is in the best interest of an urban climate where we're trying to develop in an efficient manner. I think to me that means it's important that this forest conservation program allows Annapolis to continue to grow and to grow in a way that promotes strong urban forestry results. So that's a shady, high-quality environment throughout the city for all members of the city, all people of the city. And so as we come to the details, I would ask for the benefit of my clients and the building industry, development industry, that we focus on creating clarity, predictability, and goals that impose standards that are in the interest of the citywide urban forestry result, and not impose citywide goals on specific individual projects, or impose restrictions that focus on preserving a single tree or preserving all priority forest to the detriment of this Annapolis metropolitan area's environmental resources. So please keep in mind that the type of urban development that we need to see for Annapolis to grow in an efficient way going forward could be severely taxed by the wrong kind of forest conservation program. So I'd propose that you stay close to the model ordinance, and in areas where you might stray from that you think very, very carefully about the types of restrictions that might have unintended consequences. Thanks very much.
Mr. Dales is the last person signed up to speak. If you'd like to address the council on this matter, please come forward.
Good evening, Council. My name is Rob Savage. I live at 12 Windwhisper Lane. And first, I'd just like to say a thank you to everybody. I know a number of you have put in a lot of time and effort on this ordinance over a number of years at this point. And I think you should be, proud of what you came up with, and everybody who's on there as a sponsor. It's a good ordinance. And I think it would be actually one of the strongest in the state, if not the strongest that I've seen anyway. So kudos to you. I think good job, and thank you for all the time you've put into on this. That said, I do have a couple of areas I wanted to comment on, just in terms of where I think you might be able to strengthen it and close some potential weak areas, potential loopholes. And I guess before I get into that, I would like to say I also support the Planning Commission recommendations. I feel like they do close a lot of these weak areas that I have in mind. I'm not going to go through all those. I'll just highlight 4 or 5 that I have. One of them is the variance hearing procedure. A little concerned from what I've read. It sounds like there would be no public hearing on any kind of variances under the FCA in this ordinance. And that's a bit different from how it's handled in the Planning and Zoning Code. For a typical zoning variance, the public gets a chance to have a hearing and attend. So I just want to encourage you to give the public a chance to comment on variances under this ordinance. The second thing is unwarranted hardship. I recommend changing some of the language in there just to better match the state language. And I did submit some written testimony that has details on all these. The third thing is dealing with technical manual. As you know, the technical manual will give staff the details about how to implement the Forest Conservation Act. And under this ordinance, it would allow the director to unilaterally make changes to the technical manual without any kind of oversight. So I just wanted to recommend, maybe having like the Planning Commission or Environmental Commission or even the Environmental Matters Committee just provide oversight if the director or department want to make changes, that they go to those bodies for review. Or at the least some sort of public notification so the public will know when changes are trying to be made to the manual. The fourth thing, I guess, is the fee in lieu. I also had a number of comments on this in my written testimony, but fee in lieu is when if a developer pays when they can't protect enough forest on the property, they pay into a fund. Traditionally, these are very difficult to actually manage and utilize. The fact that there's simply not enough land around here to replant forests, and on the second hand, a lot of that reforested, the mitigated forest just doesn't survive very well. It doesn't often turn into a fully functioning forest. So if you want to have fee in lieu, I recommend raising the bar quite high, make sure it's going to raise enough money for land acquisition rather than just planting new forest. And the other 2 issues, which I know you can't address in this ordinance, there are very good reasons I've heard about why you can't, but those are the appeal issues, which have been sort of a long-standing concern from a lot of the public, which is that the process is still sort of all over the place. It does follow the plan development approval. However, depending on the type of project, some of those appeals will go to the Building Board of Appeals, some will go to the Board of Appeals, some go to the Planning Commission, some go right to the Circuit Court, so it's still all over the place. And what I recommend is perhaps in some later legislation trying to have a uniform process that will send all of the appeals to the Board of Appeals, which will also carry a stay. Because I know I've talked about this before, but I feel like it's important to have a stay, which is when somebody appeals, a stay prevents the forest from getting cleared. So there's really no use in appealing the forest clearing if they're going to clear the forest anyway while you're appealing. So it's really important for environmental issues to have that stay. However, I know that, again, that probably needs to get done in different legislation. The other thing deals with the no net loss, which, again, I understand it's probably not going to work in this ordinance, but I encourage you to pass another ordinance in the future dealing with no net loss. I feel like that's important because it sets a floor. We made a goal with DNR to increase our tree canopy, and unless you have that no net loss, you're always going to be in the danger of losing more forest, which is going to make it even more difficult to reach that goal. And that is in the comprehensive plan, so I feel like it does have some more importance than a typical goal. So that's it. That's all I have to say tonight. So again, thank you for your time and effort on this ordinance.
Janet Norman, 787 Annapolis Neck Road, Ward 7. I'd just like to reiterate, thank you for your hard work. Some of Rob's comments, please take those to heart as someone who really knows the system and is trying to help you be a better legislated city. As many of you know, if you've all driven by Annapolis Middle School or driven on both sides of Spa Road and Forest Drive, those trees at Annapolis Middle along the road were fee in lieu Forest Conservation Act. And if you look at them with mowed grass underneath, that is not a forest. So as you drive by there, I'd like you to take a look and see if that has forest leaf litter and invertebrates and all the things that make up a true forest ecology, and see if you're really getting, if the county got their money's worth out of that fee in lieu replacement of forest. They didn't. So please be very careful with any fee in lieu program and make sure that you are really getting forest for forest fee in lieu dollars. There are many people in the city to assist you with proper location and sufficiency of true forest ecology for those funds. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, how are you? It's been a long time since I've seen you, but you're well and happy. Certainly I'm happy about this bill that Jared Lefton has this ordinance. And I want to commend the Environmental Matters Committee, Ross Arnett, and those of you who worked hard for Jared to produce this product. I think the developers who are here representing their constituents, let me just say, I think this is more than a reasonable time. It should bode well for all involved in the interest of everyone. I'm here really to be a backup person tonight. I agree with Rick Kissel's testimony and Rob Savage. I'm here to tell you that Greg Walker wanted to be here, Baton Rouge High School wanted to be here, Marcia Lewis, and several others of us who are pretty committed to the environment in this city. Let me just say that I think that the variances, the changes to the technical manual have oversight. Variances to have public review. CBF's definition of unwarranted hardship. The fee in lieu issue. And finally, the no net loss issue. All those are remaining issues, and I support all those, as do the other members I've just mentioned, the other people I just mentioned. We will work with Jared and the Environmental Matters Committee in getting these amendments before them. I'm sure the Annapolis Environmental Commission has already prepared those, as those in draft. They're people who are much more
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
I'll try it again. I'm Anastasia Hopkinson. I live at 1036 Harbor Drive in Annapolis, and I represent the Annapolis Neck Peninsula Federation. And we put our comments briefly in writing. We'd like to thank you for presenting this legislation, and our particular concern overall is how the public learns about forests that may be destroyed in their neighborhood. So we're concerned about notification, public hearings, variances, and appeals. And just to summarize, the public needs better notification than the Act allows, more thorough, modern means of notification, and the variance and appeals process needs some tuning up and clarification. I won't go into detail. You've heard about it a lot, so thank you very much, and we appreciate your work.
Alderman Payan?
I'm sorry, did you say we're better off now without anything than we are with this?
No.
I'm not sure
I didn't say
it's
that.
hard
no.
to hear in here tonight,
Yeah,
but...
yeah. Some would say that, but we recognize there are some improvements in 022, but it needs further work. We don't consider it a finished act.
Okay,
Especially on notifications, on many aspects of it. No net loss. There are many characteristics of it that need. It is like a boat where you're building the hull and you still haven't finished the hull. So you're going to set it afloat and it's not going to do as well.
Okay, I can understand that, but I've been led to believe by one or two people and got an email today about it that's kind of what this person was saying, and frankly, it didn't make any sense to me. I understand we still need work, but this seems like a very viable place to start. It's better than a place to start. It may not be terrific in every respect, but at least compared to what we have now, I think it appears to me to be a huge improvement, and with the understanding that it still needs further work. Is that safe to say that?
I would not say it's a huge improvement, but there are improvements. And I would further say that if you don't continue to make those improvements in a rapid fashion, you lose all the advantage.
Yeah,
and you
okay.
will have launched a boat with an incomplete hull.
Okay, thank you.
Kendall Charles?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Hopkinson, if we're looking at it from a percentage standpoint, would you say we're 60% there or 50% there or 80% there, just to kind of give us a ballpark?
Well, I think you've made steps in the right direction, so you're heading in the right direction, but you're only 40% there. Issues like no net loss, I've enumerated them here, but there are very, very important issues that could have a substantial negative impact on a forest if you don't enable the legislation to be as strong as it needs to be. It doesn't need to be adverse to any developer's interest. It simply needs to protect forests. And the legislation as currently written has deficiencies. It's a step in the right direction, but you're only, the beginning steps.
Okay, so you're saying we're halfway there?
say you're halfway there.
Okay,
Yeah, because
okay.
it's the significance of what's missing
Okay,
or inadequate.
okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Good. No? How about now? Can you hear me? Hi, guys. My name is Forrest Mays. I live on 2646 Mosquée Farm Road. And I came here for this public hearing on the Forest Conservation Act. There's been a lot of back and forth from you guys. I mean, you had one person or a couple people starting some legislation and then somebody else saying we want to have something different. The public's a little confused. But what we really want to know, and I have two questions for you, and they both begin with what? What is your decision going to cost the earth? What is your decision going to cost the community? You guys are all sworn here to do good for the natural resources of the city of Annapolis and also for the community. You kind of know what you got to do and who you're working for here. We know, we've seen it. We've been doing this for 10 years trying to protect this forest. People are seeing Annapolis and what they do. What do they stand for? That's the next thing. What do you stand for in doing this legislation, in finding a way to make it able to cut down as many trees as you want, or as the developers want? What are you proving by doing that? I know you can do it. Every city in America does it. The only thing valuable we have left is the earth. I spent like 3 hours in the forest yesterday. I tell you, it's the most remarkable place. It's a mile from Annapolis. And if your only vision for it is to pave it, is to try and cut as many trees down as possible and save the rest or plant them or have somebody buy the trees that you don't do you really, really think you're doing your job as council people, as the mayor? Is this what you're in charge to do? Is to help people make money off of our earth? I mean, that's really what's going on here. It's how much more money can certain people make, right? I mean, how much money can you make off of this land? And how many professionals are being supported by this? Who stands to gain by losing forests, the last forest in Annapolis? I know you know. I know you know. You do too. Some people, I don't think they get it. And I think it's wonderful that some people get it here. I really want to be known in this city that Annapolis is a green, environmentally friendly city. Not that we have city councilmen who think it's a joke or that laugh about the environment or really working behind the scenes, not for the people, not for the community, not for the earth, but to help certain people to make money. Now, I want you guys to take that into consideration. You know the two things that you have to decide. This game has been rigged, as far as the community is concerned, for lots and lots of times. I mean, the former mayor lost his election on it, right? Do you think anybody here is vulnerable if we come out and say you're really not environmentally friendly? You're just kind of painted green? And believe me, this affects more than just land. It affects how we treat each other. That's part of the problem, that Annapolis needs to come out of that mentality that everything can be a commodity. Land is not a commodity, people are not a commodity, We have to take care of this community. That's your primary job. That's what this public hearing is about. You can go through the dissecting how much and how little and what works and what doesn't work, but the bottom line is your own moral compass towards what it costs the earth and what it costs the community. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to testify? Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on O-2216 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, next on tonight's agenda is another public hearing. This one is Ordinance O-2616, which involves extending hours in parking districts 3 and 4, President's Hill and Murray Hill.
The first three people signed up to speak are Rick Trout, Mike Parker, and Martha Liam.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor Panelidis. My name is Rick Trott. I'm president of President's Hill Community Association. I live at 54 Madison Place, and I'm here to support Ordinance 2616. Thank you to Alderman Joe Budge for extending the hours in parking districts 3 and 4 from 8 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week. I've included also in a handout that I just put forward pages 35 and 36 of the PHCA neighborhood plan from 2001 that discusses problems in parking in this neighborhood from as far back as 2001. So these are not, new issues that we're discussing here. We're just trying to, move our neighborhood forward here. So as we continue to enhance our city with new opportunities with local businesses, we need to ensure that we look out for our neighborhood and residents too. My family came to Annapolis in the mid-1850s. More specifically, they moved to President's Hill in 1900 through 1969. My grandmother and my dad grew up in President's Hill, and I lived there as a young child. So it's important to me, and I'm very passionate about it. Since my wife and I moved back here to President's Hill in 2012, the support of this neighborhood and these opportunities I've shown with this particular issue provides me such a sense of pride. It's a great place to call home. So I encourage you to adopt Ordinance 2616 for extension of these hours in parking districts 3 and 4. And I'd also like to thank the local businesses that also supported us, and I've included those letters in the documents that I handed out. Carpaccio, Cado's, the Lutheran Mission Society, Metropolitan, Lemongrass, the Sailor Oyster Bar, Sparrow, Nancy Hammond Editions, and the Lowe's Hotel and Naptown Furniture. These are all on the inner West Street that all cross over through Murray Hill and President's Hill. In closing, I'd also like to thank Mike Parker and Jared Lerner for their hard work in gathering signatures for this petition, and of course our neighborhood for their overwhelming support. Thank you to the City Council and to the Mayor for letting me speak on behalf of the community. Thank you.
Thank you for coming by.
Good evening. My name is Michael P. Parker. I reside at 28 Madison Place in the President's Hill neighborhood. I oversaw the petition drive in President's Hill soliciting support for O-2616, extending hours in parking districts 3 and 4. Our community association submitted a petition containing 86 signatures supporting the proposed ordinance to the city's Transportation Board on the 22nd of April. Tonight, I'm submitting an additional 37 signatures gathered since that time. A total of 123 adult residents of President's Hill signed the petition supporting the bill. This number includes occupants of 91 out of 105 occupied households in the neighborhood, representing 87% of the total households. 84 property owners representing 64 households out of a total of 115 in President's Hill also signed the petition. So we have clear majorities, an overwhelming majority of residents in favor, and a substantial majority of property owners in favor. 4 members of the community refused to sign. 2 were concerned that extended enforcement would complicate visits from their friends and relatives during the evening hours. 2 other residents refused to sign on philosophical and constitutional grounds, stating that they oppose the concept of the city charging a fee for residential parking. We were unable to contact residents of the remaining 10 households and a number of non-resident landlords. Residential parking was instituted for the entirety of President's Hill in 1998. Monroe Court had been included in the original District 4, but not the rest of the neighborhood. We've long foreseen that one day we would have to increase the hours of enforcement, but we've resisted this step as long as we could. Indeed, the community long deliberated in 2008 on asking for stricter and longer hours of enforcement, but we rejected it at that time because we thought the time isn't right. It just isn't that bad yet. However, in the intervening years, the success of the West Street Arts and Entertainment District and the consequent proliferation of restaurants and bars has forced us to reconsider the issue. Testimony from our residents, 1/3 of whom lack off-street parking, makes it clear that parking during the evening hours has become increasingly difficult and frustrating. As the attached petition demonstrates, the expeditious passage of O-2616 is the will of the overwhelming majority of the residents of President's Hill. Thank you. And I have this.
Good evening. My name is Martha Lehman. I live at 19 Murray Avenue. I live in the first block of Murray Avenue, where there are currently 13 driveways. So I have lived in my home for 31 years and have not had an issue with parking. 99% of the time I'm able to park in front of my home. I understand that the people here who are speaking in support of this extension of the parking certainly do have issues. I don't want to discount that. Many of my friends and neighbors do have issues related to parking from the bars and the restaurants. They live close to those establishments. However, in the first block of Murray, I have not experienced that. So I would like to ask for an opportunity to have perhaps a readjustment to the map, or to have some additional opportunities for some comment. I don't know if it's possible at this time, but it's something I would like to be considered, as I am currently, like I said, not having an issue with the parking in our block. So I don't know if we need clarification. Is that an opportunity for us to provide some additional readjustments to the current map?
I'll defer to Alderman Budge.
We can certainly discuss amendments to the ordinance, and you're welcome to join us at the Transportation Committee meeting right here Tuesday the 19th at 6:30.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. The next 3 people signed up to speak are Whitney Chellis, Ellen Meone, and Wendy Moore. And I apologize if I butchered your name.
Oh, that's okay. For the record, Whitney Chellis. I live at 18 Lafayette Avenue. I'm in the first block of Lafayette Avenue. I've been at my house for 16 years. And over that period of time, there's been a significant change to both pedestrian and vehicular traffic. It's something that I expect with what's occurring on West Street. I'm very happy about the success of the businesses. And I think I have reasonable expectations. I expect that I'm going to have noise. I'm going to have parking issues and a lot of traffic. But I do think that the city does have a responsibility to help us balance the interests of both the commercial and the residents. And I think that this ordinance does that. I think it's fair. It doesn't extend all the way into the entirety of District 3. So I'm fully in support of it, and I appreciate Alderman Budge for moving this forward and all of the work of the Murray Hill Residents Association and President's Hill. So I wanted to thank you for this, what I perceive as a balanced approach.
Can I hear myself better now? So I'm speaking against the parking restrictions as they're proposed. In 19 years of living at Murray Avenue, I've rarely ever had an issue in parking. As someone mentioned earlier, there's a lot of homes that have driveways. So parking in the evening is typically not an issue. You know, as a taxpayer, we're spending $6,000, $10,000, $12,000 a year in taxes, and then an additional, I guess, $55 for the pleasure of parking in front of our house. And from a practical standpoint, I wonder how this all would work out. Of course, the budget would have to be increased to have an additional person drive around in the after hours and on the weekends. That's $50,000, $70,000 in fully burdened costs for that person. I know our budgets are tight, so I don't know if we can put those dollars towards something a little bit more applicable. And I also recognize there are neighbors that do have issues that they've discussed here but the neighbors I've spoke to on Murray Avenue have had no issues whatsoever and are against it. The other practical consideration is we all have friends and family that stop by our homes for dinner or to say hello. And how do we anticipate that? To have parking passes just laying around the house? How do we acquire those? We have to be off work to come downtown to pick them up? And is there a cost? Every time we have a friend stop by, does it cost us $4 for them to stop by for 20 minutes? They don't get a $35 parking ticket. So I think there are legitimate constraints and practicalities involved here as well. Perhaps for those who live in areas that the parking is an issue, they don't mind going down to get the parking passes and paying $4 per person anytime they have people over, if they have a gathering. But for us, like on Murray Avenue, I would propose a further restriction that maybe some of these streets would be not included in this new proposal for parking. Thank you very much.
Fudge.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. I'd like to address one of your question about the cost of implementing the program. We explored that with the city's parking vendor, SP Plus, before introducing this legislation, and they assured us that given the amount of enforcement effort that they are planning throughout the rest of the residential parking districts, they can accommodate this within their existing budget.
And how would the parking passes be distributed, and would we incur additional cost on top of our parking passes and our taxes just to have people stop by for a few minutes to say hello?
The the parking passes that you buy for your vehicles now would have no extra cost. If you want to get parking passes for your friends and relatives for the day passes, those will cost according to the pricing schedule, which I think is, help me out, somebody?
I believe they're $4 a day.
Finance? $4, so $40 for 10.
So if we have, people stop by 50 times a year after hours to say hello, it's 50 times 4, $200 additional money to see our friends.
Sure, and
I think that's...
I hear you, and as I mentioned, we'll discuss this point in the Transportation Committee.
Thank you. I'll see you there. Thank you.
My name is Karen Koch, and I live at 46 Lafayette Avenue, and I'm also a small business owner in this city, so I do understand both sides of the coin here. And we've lived in our house for 10 years, and lately parking has become a much, much bigger issue. I am for this change in the parking hours, but isn't it also that people can park for 2 hours whether they have a sticker or not? Am I not correct about that? So
that's correct.
To take Mr. Fitzpatrick's point, if they're stopping for 20 minutes or half an hour, they're not going to get a ticket. I mean, it does create an issue when you have overnight guests and all that. But I live in a part of Lafayette where there is only parking on one side of the street. Most of the time I cannot park in front. I can't park in front of my house. There's no parking there on that side of the street. So a lot of times I'm lugging groceries a couple of blocks because there's no place to park, and especially when there are events at Lowe's Hotel. My big issue about all of this is the city has numerous parking garages, and why can't the businesses urge their customers to use the parking garages and make a deal with them about using the parking garages? But as I said, I am for this because it has become harder and harder to park in my neighborhood. And I might point out, I live right on the top of Shaw in Lafayette, and Shaw has that parking restriction on it all along Shaw from 8 a.m. to midnight 7 days a week. I'm right around the corner, and mine is only from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. 5 days a week. So to me, it's not fair. I do understand about Murray, and yes, I think there are probably some streets that could be omitted from this plan. But and I think you need to ask residents, but as I said, I think there are ways to solve this problem that aren't onerous on everybody, the people that live in the neighborhoods, the people that come and visit people in the neighborhoods, but also the people that come and visit the city. I lived for a number of years in Philadelphia, and if you can imagine what it's like trying to park in the city of Philadelphia with all their parking restrictions, and I lived to tell the tale and never got a parking ticket because we dealt with it, it's doable. So I support this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The next three people who are signed up to speak are John Lodor, John Clemens, and Curtis DeStefano.
Good evening, and thank you for hearing us out tonight. I'm John Lodor, by the way. I'm a resident of 22 Madison Place. I've been a resident there for about 18 years. I have watched West Street grow and grow and grow, and my parking disappear. I have pretty much a weak job, but I do come and go when I need to. I'm here in support of passing this bill as it stands, and all the new restaurants, all the new West Street growth has really become a real problem for those of us without driveways in our neighborhood of President's Hill. So there you go, and thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
I'm John Clemens. I live at 48 Madison Place in President's Hill. I'm about a 30-year resident there, and I want to support the ordinance. I just want to echo what many have already said, that parking is much more difficult. And even though I have a driveway, I haven't always had one. And I know it was a problem even years ago, but it has become much more of a problem. And I would also like to note that for the people that were talking about possibly not having it extend out into some other areas, they might want to consider that if near West Street is restricted, then people are just going to come into their neighborhoods. So, they may want to think about that consequence. But that's not really my issue, but I do want to support the bill. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm Curtis DeStefano, President of Murray Hill Residents Association. We're the co-sponsor of the petition with President's Hill. And so what we did was to group our efforts, and I would like to point out that we believe this is a comprehensive study of parking that borders West Street in that arts and entertainment district. We took a lot of care to look at everybody's different position. We had conversations and letters of support from the businesses. We looked, now Murray, as you know, President's Hill, Murray Hill, President's Hill, the streets that border West Street have the greatest impact. Murray Hill obviously extends a lot further and is a lot larger. But what our plan includes the streets that are closest to West Street. So as you know, if you're familiar with that area, when they first built it out, you have the first couple of blocks are row houses and a lot of houses without driveways. In fact, on Murray Avenue, we maybe have Murray and Colonial and Morris, maybe 40% of the people have driveways and garages. So we're left on the streets. So this bill, this ordinance, is for the folks that are competing for parking spots in those areas. So we've encompassed the businesses. We talked to the rest of the residents. You can see by President's Hill, they have an 87% support. If you look at the streets that are impacted in Murray Hill, we have over 100 signatures as well. So I apologize, I walked out with the wrong file today. I'm going to leave this with the council. You can circulate it. But on the top part is President's Hill, and they gave you a map for that. What we have here is West Street, okay? So what you've experienced in the past were individual streets coming in and asking you for relief. German Street, Shaw Street, Water, all the streets in blue have already the more restrictive. The streets in pink are proposed. The streets that are left out would be, so there's a street right here by Monticello is MX zoned, which is uptown at Murray Hill, okay? So they're newer development. They already have driveways with 2 parking spots. And in fact, when we made a presentation to the Transportation Board, they clearly pointed out to people that were in opposition that they needed to consider what city life is like. And I can tell you that even though we are really impacted by these businesses, the folks in Ward 1, even further down, they're even more impacted. And the Transportation Board asked several of them, asked people to consider the fact that when you move into the city, you have to expect to be able to trade time with the local businesses and work together. So the local businesses now are in support, the majority are in support. They still have 2 hours, but we get a little bit of everything. I'm on Colonial at the end of Murray, and we have people that'll come in on Friday, grab a suitcase, roll into the local hotel, and the car doesn't move until Monday. So, you know, we really need the relief in the evening hours and on the weekends. I would say to you that, in talking to folks, like Mr. Fitzpatrick, who I know very well, but we differ on this, I'm not sure he really did his homework here. He said everybody he talked to on Murray. Well, we have the majority of the people on Murray are in favor of our petition, number one. Second thing is, Alderman Budge corrected him very fairly. He wasn't sure how to get the passes. SP Plus is everything's going to be available online. You simply log in a plate for an overnight guest, and it's whatever it is, $3 or $4. You know, we have plenty of resources in this area, unlike the folks further down the historic district. We've got, you know, Park Place, the Knighton Garage, and so there are many resources for folks that come into our area to park other than on the streets. So, you know, I'd like you to consider and vote in favor of that. One of the other things I want to point out is that if you hear opposition from folks, I would ask you to consider whether or not they actually have a driveway or not. You know, we've had some folks that have driveways that aren't considering the people that don't have driveways. So, any questions from anybody?
Just have one comment, and we'll get to the questions. For the businesses, because we've heard this a lot from people parking on the streets, the employees coming, we hear you loud and clear. The city had started a program a number of years ago for $2 parking all day for anyone who works for a business. And we've been going around talking to all the business owners again, reminding their employees that rather than getting a $40 ticket or moving your car every 2 hours, you can park all day in Park Place Garage for $2.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for pointing that out. And we've had SP Plus made a presentation at our meeting. We've seen, I mean, we are, the move that the city council and the city to hire SP Plus, we've seen great improvement so far. We're really in favor of it. We feel like the enforcement's going to get to where it needs to be. We just need to tighten up these hours, and, you know, we have good enforcement coming behind it. We're trying to get a good, you know, we already have a good in trying to enhance our working relationship with the businesses. Mm-hmm. So I'd ask you to vote in favor of it, and I'm going to circulate this if that's possible. Hold on to it.
Sure. Yeah.
You're not done yet. I think we have some questions for you. Alderman Budge?
Absolutely.
You mentioned that you have 100 signatures on your petition. Could you get copies of those to Ms. Gaines ASAP?
Okay.
Because at the moment we only have about 13 in the public record.
Okay.
And we'd like to see the whole shamola in the record. That's a technical term.
Yes, I had asked the city clerk to get us copies of the map also.
Okay.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
apologize, I grabbed the wrong file and
Oh, I-
walked out of the house.
The map is already in our packets. In Granicus, yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
The last person signed up to speak is Stuart Cohen.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Councilman. My name is Stuart Cohen. I am the president of Uptown at Murray Hill Homeowners Association. I live at 32 Steele Avenue, and for the record, that's the S-T-E-E-L-E, Steele Avenue. I know a number of residents are here with me who came later when the sheet was picked up, so I assume you will give them opportunities to speak after I finish. This development of Uptown is 30 single-family homes, duplex and townhouses bordered by West Street, Southgate Avenue, and Steele Avenue, part of Zone 3 parking area. When this Bozzuto-built development was approved, it was zoned MX, even though it was to be entirely residential with bylaws that prevent all commercial use. As Uptown residents moved into their new homes in 2013, they individually purchased Zone 3 parking permits. However, in July 2014, the Uptown residents were informed for the first time that they were not eligible to purchase these parking permits as they resided in an MX zone development. During the 2013-2014 year, even though construction was ongoing with the Uptown project, with many extra vehicles from the contractors parking on adjacent streets, there was really no issue raised as to a shortage of parking for the area residents. After we were told that we were no longer eligible to purchase parking permits, we met with Councilman Budge and reluctantly agreed with a compromise proposal to create a separate parking zone just for Uptown residents that would only run along the east side of Steele Avenue, facing the 5 single-family homes, which are part of the community. When that proposal was considered by the Transportation Committee, it was not approved, and the Uptown homeowners were informed that no city parking changes would be considered until after the city's parking study was completed. But tonight the council is considering just such a change to its parking requirements, even though the parking study has not been completed. We, the over 60 residents of Uptown at Murray Hill, are asking to be afforded equal treatment, especially in light of the new escalating parking fines, which can quickly exceed $100 per infraction. It is crucial for our parking concerns to be addressed now. That discussion earlier about visitor parking, those visitors who come and stay for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and one of the parking enforcement vehicles goes by and the camera records their license plate, and those people leave and they come back an hour or two later and the traffic enforcement camera goes by again, they're going to get a parking violation ticket even though they'd only been there for 20, 40 an hour time total. We have guests too who come at night. We need places for them to park even though we have 2 parking spaces per unit. There's no place in the development for our guests and visitors to park. As tax-paying homeowners, we ask to be treated equally, just as our neighbors in Murray Hill. If this proposed amendment is to be favorably considered, then we would request the ordinance be also amended so that it no longer excludes Uptown at Murray Hill residents from purchasing Zone 3 parking permits and visitor passes. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have to clarify the point.
Alderman Budge.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. And I would like to testify, I guess, to the accuracy of your description with one correction.
Okay.
And that is that your group appeared before the Transportation Board, which is an advisory body, not before the Transportation Committee, which is a subcommittee of this council.
I stand corrected.
And
Thank you.
that's fine. I just want my fellow members of the council to keep the players straight. Thank you.
That's right. Thank you.
If there's anyone else from the public who would like to come by, now is your opportunity. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Stan Newquist. I live at 5 Hill Street, Annapolis, Maryland, President's Hill.
Can you talk closer into the microphone, please?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Stan Newquist.
Yeah, it's on.
All right. My name is Stan Newquist. I live at 5 Hill Street, Annapolis, and President's Hill. I'm also the vice president of the neighborhood. Most of the folks here tonight I've been in the neighborhood for 40 plus years. And over those 40 years, I bought my house back in '82 after living with my parents in the neighborhood. One of the things about the neighborhood is we fought really hard to save a lot of buildings around Annapolis in our area. We fought to save the 5, the Lemongrass, the Metropolitan, and all that. So we work with all the businesses. We work with Jerry Parks, 99 sitting in our dining room. Over the years, now it's coming. The hotels. Sitting there looking at some quick notes. The Lighthouse Bistro, the Sailor Bar. We've helped them, and now they're helping us. They've sent a lot of letters in to the president in support. The parking is really tough right now. So we've helped encourage all this growth, and now we're kind of suffering from it now. So we're looking to you guys, the council, Mr. Mayor, to help us out on this. We're trying to help get a nice town going and keep it that way. We love it. We enjoy living in the city. We love all the amenities of the city, and we just like to live in harmony. I think we support the businesses. They support us, and we hope you guys support us tonight as well. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else from the public?
Is there a chance I could address the
Sorry.
Hi, I'm David Imes, and I'm here. Actually, I was just here to listen and find a little bit more about this parking issue and about the FCA. But I think it's I've had a lot of interest with MPDU units. I'm at 18 Silverwood Circle. I do not live in that area, but I am a godparent to someone who lives in Uptown at Murray Hill, and I'm there a lot. And we had a development recently that came to us at the Planning Commission, but I'm not speaking on the Planning Commission. And basically, the developer came and said that this other development was going to be very much like Uptown and Murray Hill, which they said was mostly just divorced people, single people living there, and not families and not couples, and there really wouldn't be any issues. And that's not the case of that area at all. That area there's families, it's a very mixed-use community, but it's not mixed use as far as commercial at all. I'm concerned that there was not the due diligence when this was put in. I think it's an amazing development with MPDU units integrated correctly, and I think it really adds a lot to the community and a lot to West Street as well. But I'm just concerned that people who move into a place like this, and if the due diligence wasn't made, everybody should assume that they would be treated as any other resident there. So I think it's very important that you really consider that people do have guests to come, they do have caregivers, they do have a lot of people visiting, and there are people in that whole area that do have 2 parking spaces. And when we say 2 parking spaces, we're not talking 2 parking spaces side by side. We're talking about a garage and a space in front. That's a lot different than just 2 spaces. So I just want everybody to be clear that I would consider that the MX zoning is just erroneous. It has nothing to do with mixed use. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. We moved to Uptown Murray Hill,
We moved to Annapolis, Maryland in 1978, and then we went away for a few years, and we came back because we missed Annapolis. So we moved back, my husband and I, in 2013 to Uptown Murray Hill. And we were so excited to see all of the development that had happened since we'd been gone. And we are really close friends with a lot of people in Murray Hill. It has become a really great, thriving little community. People walk through our smallish park. They bring their dogs from Murray Hill through our park. The Bates kids come through our park. It's really been a good experience, except for the parking issue. And while we, just like most of the residents in Murray Hill, have 2 parking spaces, it doesn't help us during the day if we have guests who come for longer than 2 hours. It's a pain in the neck. And we pay taxes just like everybody else, and we should be treated just like everybody else. So I really hope that you will let us tag on to changing that problem for us. It will make us feel like we're more a part of the community instead of stepchildren. It would really be nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
I'm so sorry. My name is Jane Ruska, H-R-U-S-K-A. I live at 83 Southgate Avenue.
Thank you.
I'm Bonnie Leopard, 229 West Street.
Hear me? Don't hold the mic, because when you pull it, you turn it off. And look for the little light, because we want to hear you on television.
Okay. Stand on the side, okay. So I have 2 questions for the council, and one is that I'm wondering how this ordinance is actually before the council now, when for our issue, our parking issue, we were told that the parking study needed to be done before any further consideration. So part of my question is, how is this before the council without that parking study having been done? And then 2, if it's not so necessary, if everything's by petition, is it possible for the council, before voting on this ordinance, to consider our situation and perhaps amend the ordinance? Thank you.
Answering your questions, this ordinance is before the council because the Transportation Board recommended it to the council. Under the city statutes, you petition the Transportation Board for changes or additions to the residential parking districts. If the Transportation Board recommends a change to the council, we are obliged to act on it by ordinance within 60 days. This is that ordinance which they recommended. They did not make a recommendation to the council in the case of Uptown at Murray Hill. Therefore, there was no ordinance, because that's where things start. That being said, we're examining the issue, and we can talk about this further and talk about amendments at the Transportation Committee, which I think answers both of your questions.
Yeah, my name is John Goodis, 75 Southgate Avenue. Thank you for a few moments tonight. That's the first time that's ever been said to me. I'm very proud of that now. But if the door is open to consider residential parking changes, I'm just asking that the council do request, at least to give a good hearing, additional hearing as required, for the request from Uptown at Murray Hill. I'm an engineer by training, and you can't stop being an engineer by training, or being an engineer, and I wanted to look and understand the voice that Uptown and Murray Hill has. So I went through the public records, and I examined the tax base. Prior to the community's development, it had a total city tax of $10,243. That's now over $110,000 a year in city taxes just from this development. So even though you can't hear me everywhere, I think the community does have a voice that warrants consideration of their request. Every year we're clicking $100,000 into the till, and that's non-trivial. So all we're asking for is a hearing as appropriate for the requests that are on the table, and you make your own choices. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Hartman, and I live at 221 West Street. And I truly sympathize with all the parking issues that everybody's experiencing from the Murray Hill and the President's Hill community, because I've had those issues since I moved into Uptown at Murray Hill 3 years ago. I love my new home in Annapolis. It was the best thing that I've ever done, except for the one parking issue that makes me feel like I'm not quite part of the community. You know, they were speaking earlier about doing the study of the neighborhoods bordering West Street. Well, I live right on West Street, but nobody came to my door looking for my opinion, you know, and how I felt about the parking. You know, and, you know, frankly, this parking thing has, you know, it's been a very, very divisive issue in our community. I've got a dog that I'm out there up and down Southgate Road every other day, talking to my neighbors, friendly with my neighbors. Most of them, you know, support, you know, the efforts that our community is trying to make. But frankly, it's, you know, I live in the community, pay taxes in the community, but can't park in the community. And my unique situation is I am divorced, I guess, that, you know, from that whole study that was done, maybe they were talking about me. And I live there with my 2 adult children. And they both go to school at the community college. So I can't tell you the parking tickets we racked up because, you know, tried to tell a 19 and 20-year-old to go park in the parking garage when they're late for their 8 o'clock class in the morning. It, you know, doesn't go over very well. So, you know, we tried, but, you know, the situation just isn't working for us, and we had no idea of these restrictive laws when we moved in. So I'm just really asking you to consider making the Uptown at Murray Hill community part of the greater Annapolis community. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Jason Beal. I am a current resident of 17 Jefferson Place, Annapolis, Maryland, 21401. I bought my home with my husband, Addison Landers, almost 2 years ago, so relatively speaking, I'm fairly new to Annapolis, and I have to say that I love everything about it. About a year ago, I began a job 50 minutes away, but I have no plan on moving to Howard County because I love Annapolis that much, except for this parking issue. And Addison and I fall into that category of those without off-street parking. And I must tell you, it's such a great inconvenience. If we get home, let's say 7:30, 8 o'clock, we may have to park across West Street. Jefferson Place connects to West Street, so that's really a prime spot. We're very close to Fideau and Mashirley's. So again, in the evening, we may have to park across the street, which in the summer months isn't terrible, but in the winter, a huge inconvenience, of course. And then something else to mention is that it's almost become that we have to sort of plan our weekends around it. Okay, well, I can't go grocery shopping Sunday at afternoons because if we come back around 1 or 2, Miss Shirley's and these other anyone going out to brunch is going to be taking up all of Jefferson Place, and so we're left to park and then take parking from Monticello, Steele Avenue, so we're pulling from the our fellow neighbors. So again, I appreciate your consideration. I'm in full support, along with my husband, of extending the hours. Thank you so much.
My name is Addison. I live at 17 Jefferson as well. And I would like to add that we also have friends and family, and they would fall under having to get a permit to park. But I am okay with that because I would like to have parking in front of my house or near my house. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Megan Pantelis of 87 Southgate Avenue. I just want to speak, to concur with some of my neighbors at Uptown at Murray Hill. We really do support our neighbors who have difficulties parking, and we want to be supportive of this ordinance in general, I think. But our big issue here is fairness, and I just think that it's not right that our issue was put on hold for years while this is going to be addressed immediately. And I think we would all be very supportive of this if our parking issues were addressed in an amendment at the exact same time, allowing us to have District 3 parking and obtain visitor passes.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Going once, going twice? Last chance? All right. I declare the public hearing on O2616 closed. We will take a 10-minute break and adjourn back at 9:10. I know. The council is now back in session. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, there's another public hearing on the agenda, O2716, involving election code updates for certain chapters of Title IV of the code.
Nobody was signed up in advance to speak. If you'd like to address the council, now is your opportunity. We are speaking on R1216, Catherine Properties Annexation and Public Facilities Agreement. We're on which one? Oh, hold on. Oh, nope. We jumped out of order. I'm sorry, Mr. Hyatt. We are on O2716, the election code update.
Correct.
Don't want to speak to that one.
However, does anyone want to speak to this one? Anybody signed up? All right. No comment? All right. Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on O2716 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next, Mr. Mayor, is another public hearing, Resolution 1816, regarding Forest Conservation Act fees and fines.
This is for the Forest Conservation Act. If you would like to speak with it, you can come forward now. The fees and fines, correct. All right. Seeing no movement in the chamber, I accept into the record a memorandum to the Annapolis City Council from the Planning Commission dated 6/15/2016, and I declare the public hearing on R1816 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next is a public hearing, R-21-16, Catherine Properties Annexation and Public Facilities Agreement status.
Mr. Hyatt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, Alan Hyatt, 200 Westgate Circle. I had the opportunity to speak before you on the evening that this legislation was introduced on first reader, and my position has not changed. I think that this legislation was ill-conceived. I think I told you that when I last spoke. It's poorly drafted, and it's based on faulty reasoning. I handed out to you an exhibit, which I'm going to talk to you about in just a moment. That came about when the city, a little over 10 years ago, studied annexations. And as you can see on the exhibit, the city of Annapolis is all about annexations. It grew through annexations. And what is not shown on the exhibit are the recent annexations. And when I say recent, I'm talking about Catherine Properties, Annapolis Neck, Rogers. They're not on this map. But I think it's important to know that prior to what I'll call the modern annexations, what the city did is adopted a resolution which approved an annexation, zoned the property, and that was all it did. Starting about 2005, a resolution was adopted, the property was zoned, and then the city entered into an agreement with the property owner, and those agreements are known as public facilities agreements. And you have one of those here for Catherine Properties and a couple of the others that are before you tonight. What a public facilities agreement does is it takes the principles embodied in the resolution and creates a contract between the property owner and the city of Annapolis. So in the case of Catherine Properties, there's a public facilities agreement between the city and the owner of Catherine Properties. And if there is a disagreement on the events that have taken place with respect to that contract, then one party can allege a breach of contract. Perhaps the parties can renegotiate the contract, but this legislation doesn't do that. This legislation seeks to go back in history and suggest that perhaps something is wrong with the annexation resolution. Well, you know, there's no procedure to, I don't know what the term of art should be, there's no procedure to de-annex or separate from the city. I mean, if you give somebody that opportunity, they may take advantage of it, but there is no legal opportunity to do that. So why go through this exercise? I refer you to the preamble in Resolution 2116, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but the last whereas clause states that the City Council has a responsibility to determine how to best reform the Public Facilities Agreement in light of subsequent changes to the City Comprehensive Plan. Well, let's take a look at that for a minute. Catherine Properties was annexed by the City Council in 2005. The City of Annapolis Comprehensive Plan was adopted in 2009. So what are we talking about here? What changes took place in the comprehensive plan? That's nonsense is what that is. And that's where I say there's faulty reasoning that is behind this legislation. The City of Annapolis Comprehensive Plan and those that were involved in the preparation of that plan knew full well about the annexations that took place. And in fact, Catherine Properties was designated as an opportunity area on the city's map, on the city's comprehensive plan from 2009. So, you know, it's quite an exercise to reach back and take a look at properties that were annexed in the past and then bring them in front of the council to take some kind of action. I mean, certainly that sends a chilling message to property owners in the city of Annapolis. Why not reach out to another property? I mean, look at these annexations that took place here. The whole city, substantially the whole city, has been annexed over time. I mean, look at Hunt Meadow and the property off of Bywater Road, all these, Parole, Eastport, all annexed. I mean, how do you go back and say, well, wait a minute, let's take a look at this. Something's wrong here. It's a contractual discussion is what it amounts to. And if there is a disagreement on whether one entity has performed and another one has not performed, then, you know, I'm not suggesting it, but you could have a breach of contract action, in which event the party could respond with defenses. So I think this is not the way to go. I strongly urge that it be rejected, and if there's any discussion to take place concerning a public facilities agreement, it should be between the city and the property owner. Thank you.
Alderman Budge.
Mr. Hyatt, what's the date on this map that you distributed?
This map was right around 2005. This was done, you know, there was a number of annexations in the pipeline, and the city at the time created an annexation work group, developed this particular map that showed the history of annexations up to that point in time. It does not include some of the ones that are in front of you tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to testify?
My name is Anastasia Hopkins-son, and I live at 1036 Harbor Drive, and I'm representing the Annapolis Neck Peninsula Federation. And I'm glad to see that the council is reviewing, requesting the Planning Commission to review the annexation agreements, and specifically those aspects of the possible development of these properties that concern public facilities like roads, sewer, water, and road improvements and the like. The annexations has occurred 10 years ago. I was here when they occurred, and now we're 10 years on. Conditions have significantly changed regarding public facilities, and so before development is planned for those properties, one should be aware of whether public facilities are adequate, and that's what this is calling for, a review of those public facilities. It should be done now. This is a timely way and a good way to do it before there's much planning for development. There has been a lot of planning for development on Reserve of Quiet Waters. This is the Catherine property. They're at the very, very beginning stages. So this is a timely and wise move on the part of the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on R2116 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Next, Mr. Mayor, is another public hearing, Resolution 22-16 regarding Annapolis Neck Road Property Annexation and Public Facilities Agreement status.
There are 6 people signed up to speak. Jerome Feldman, John Mayers, Fred Delavan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Madam Clerk, Mr. Attorney.
Can't hear you.
How about now? How about now? Yeah, there you go. So, my name is Jerome Feldman. I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Annapolis. I'm also an attorney with offices in Annapolis. For the past 13 years, I've been involved as one of the attorneys for the project known as Quiet Waters, also known as Parkside Preserve. I represented the clients when they entered into contracts with approximately 20 various property owners for the purchase of their properties, subject to the properties being annexed into the city of Annapolis. Again, for the past 13 years, my client has diligently pursued the process with meetings before various city agencies, boards, and commissions, finally the city council, and then back before various city agencies, boards, and commissions to continue the process of seeking necessary approvals and permits. Throughout this process, my clients have been consistent in their attempt to follow the city code and obtain the approvals and permits necessary for the installation of public utilities and permits and approvals to begin construction on their property. Conversations with the City of Annapolis Department of Public Works have been ongoing for years in an effort to obtain permits and public works agreements so that my client may proceed with all work necessary. In light of the best and continuing efforts of both my client and the City of Annapolis to obtain the approvals and permits, the city and my clients finally entered into an agreement modifying the original public facilities agreement. The work necessary to move forward with utilities is ongoing and is being accomplished in accord with this adequate public utilities mitigation agreement. As part of the post-annexation process, my clients have pursued and obtained approval of a planned unit development. My client and the City of Annapolis have revised the initial public facilities agreement with an adequate public facilities mitigation agreement. My client has been issued an adequate public facilities certificate for this project. My client has an approved final forest conservation plan. My client has a recorded subdivision plat with 66 family lots, single-family lots, 67 townhouse lots, and 19 moderately priced dwelling units. This process has been over a 13-year period of public hearings before the City Council and city agencies, and after challenges to the process in the courts by parties in opposition to the development. The planned unit development was acknowledged as having been approved by a mandate issued by the Court of Special Appeals of Maryland. The record plat of planned unit development has now been recorded among the land records of Anne Arundel County. Our client has continued to work in earnest throughout this entire process and has never stopped in their attempt to complete their obligations and satisfy the requirements necessary for them to secure the permits and approvals that will allow them to proceed with the development of their property. I want to thank you for your time and your consideration.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Yes, I'd like our attorney to speak to this resolution.
I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
I said I'd like to ask you.
Oh, to speak to the resolution. Okay. Well, in the case of Quiet Waters, also known as Parkside Preserve, originally known as the Annapolis Neck Road property annexation, there are some facts in this case that are unique to the other resolutions that are on the agenda tonight. Quiet Waters has probably been through 4 to 5 years of defending litigation. There's current litigation right now in the circuit court. What that involves is an appeal from the Building Board of Appeals of the approval of the Forest Conservation Plan. In 2012, as Mr. Feldman indicated, I was involved in the negotiation of a public facilities mitigation agreement. I think Mr. Delavan and I worked on that together, which addressed water and sewer connection responsibilities in the city. So as recently as 3.5, or I don't know the date on that agreement, but 3.5 to 4 years ago, the city negotiated with the developer this extension of public facilities services, whereby certain connections would be made with the development to city sewer and water. So I don't think their planned development has vested yet, and the reason is because they have been through so much litigation that there's not a final adjudication of the planned development that was approved by the, well, first by the, I think it was recommended in those days, it was recommended by the Planning Commission and then approved by the Building Board of Appeals. And as Mr. Feldman said, it went all the way up to the Court of Special Appeals. So they have not been able to get vested yet because of all of the litigation. The reason I say that is because once someone gets vested in a zoning approval, you can't take it away from them in any respect whatsoever. Subsequent laws are not applicable to a planned development that has vested. In this case, they haven't been able to get vested because of all the litigation, which still goes on. So they have been through the Planning Commission. We have agreements with them which says that I know I think Mr. Delavan may address this, but in the 2012 mitigation agreement, like in all contracts, there's a paragraph which says that it's the final and entire agreement between the city and the developer. So all of those taken into consideration establish that there are facts that are unique to Quiet Waters that are not applicable to some of the other annexations, which seem to say that we're legally bound to that public facilities agreement. So if we have them go through a review of that public facilities agreement again, it would seem to me that there may be some legal impediments to that. Does that clear up anything? Well,
not quite. I assume that we're going to have other opportunities to talk about all of these. And just for the record, I had made a request that we get an AG's opinion, which you have been moving through that process.
Well, I was determined by, I mean, I called the AG's office and they said the turnaround time was not going to be quick. So,
Okay, so-
unless there's some delay in the vote on this, it might not be worth, trying to get an opinion like that. But I think the law office can express an opinion on this, just as the Attorney General's office could. So if you want an outside opinion, you might go to the Attorney General's office.
Well, I think all of these have an anomaly that we're not getting all of the answers to. So that's my request. And,
Okay.
I think that we do, though, have to have an opportunity to have further discussion with a little bit more clarity than what we're getting right now.
I could, I can meet with you and give you a little bit more clarity if you want.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm willing to meet with any members of the council for that purpose, if the mayor wants me to.
By all means, yes.
Yeah, okay.
The more clarity, the better. I think the biggest one between this development and the other ones, take Catherine Properties, is they had a material breach in the contract versus this one, which has gone through.
Right.
But anyway, next three speakers, John Mayers, Fred Delavan, and Benjamin Rosenberg.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, staff, and those in the public. John Mayers, 4750 Owings Mills Boulevard, Owings Mills, Maryland. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I will speak up. I hope it's not too loud. My name's John Mayers, as I said earlier. I am the president of Chesapeake Realty Partners. Chesapeake Realty Partners has been in the business of building communities in the state of Maryland since 1946. I've only been there for a little over 29 years. I'm in my 30th year out of our 70. And in our 70 years, this is the first time we've had this kind of a process in terms of length to get a community approved. And I have been working with the city for over 7 years to get our community approved. And I appreciate you hearing from me tonight to advocate for our community. And I just wanted to point out that as a developer, we don't make the rules. We simply follow the rules. And we came to a situation where the master plan asked to have this ground annexed into the city. The city was interested in that at the time as per the resolution. The zoning and the master plan that was set on the property asked for medium density development, and we've proposed that. We've put a plan forth that has met every rule or exceeded every rule that I'm aware of or that anyone in many years of legal scrutiny has been able to come up with or put on the record. We are fully compliant. We meet or exceed all ordinances, state and local. And so we just follow the rules. And when we're approved, I just wanted to point out that we do bring benefit. We will provide over $2 million in water and sewer connection fees as an initial one-time benefit. We'll provide over $459,000 to the city roughly for inspection and review fees, many of which we've already paid. And in addition to that, we will be providing close to $3 million worth of infrastructure that gets given over to the city. We will work on water pressure in the surrounding area that today is inadequate. So in providing adequate public water for our project, we have the charge of putting a booster station in and bringing up the water pressure in the surrounding communities that exist today with inadequate pressure. We are charged with taking homes that are on existing septic systems and hooking them up to a gravity sewer, which once again from the environment will be good. There is a dump on our property that we did not put there adjacent to the park that, given the chance with our permits, we will clean that up. There will be probably an estimated $500,000 or more a year in real estate and income tax to the city from our residents. And so I thank you for your time. I ask that you, like us, stick to the contract and we all follow the rules. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Fred Delavan. I'm an attorney with the firm of Blumenthal, Delavan, Powers and Palmer. 170 Jennifer Road, Suite 240 in Annapolis. I represent QW Properties, LLC, and Chesapeake Realty Partners, respectively the owner and developer of the property on Annapolis Neck Road known as Parkside Preserve. As you know, I expect the intent of Resolution R22-16, which I'm speaking to this evening, the intent of that resolution is to force the developer to reform, that's the term used, the original public facilities agreement that was executed at the time of the annexation of the property. Essentially, that would require the developer to renegotiate its adequate public facilities agreement. My colleague Jerry Feldman, my client John Mayers, and I have had the opportunity to meet with almost all of you. You've been very generous with your time to allow us to explain our situation, and I hope you comprehend our situation, which I'm going to try to amplify a couple of those points tonight. I have provided you this evening with copies of relevant documents that relate to all of this, including the original annexation resolution, the original annexation ordinance, the original public facilities agreement that was signed at the time of the annexation, but most importantly, a copy of the adequate public facilities mitigation agreement that was negotiated and executed at the time of the Board of Appeals hearings on the plan development. A prerequisite, if you will, of those hearings was that we solidify how we were going to provide adequate public facilities, mainly sewer and water, to the project. The purpose of that adequate public facilities mitigation agreement was to provide how we're going to do that. And that was executed some 6 years after the original public facilities agreement, and it states in the body of that agreement that it's the full and final agreement between the parties, not to be modified unless there's a subsequent written agreement. And I think you all know, because I've told you, that I take great issue with the justification that was apparently drafted by the former city attorney, which is attached to R 22-16. That justification fails to mention the second agreement, the adequate public facilities mitigation agreement, that was negotiated, as I said, 6 years after the annexation took place. The justification fails to mention that this project has been in review for 10 years and active review and approval for the last 6 years. Submitted with the documents I've given you this evening is a detailed chronology of the review process that's been ongoing since 2006. And the approvals obtained to date, as mentioned by Mr. Feldman, are in part the approval of the residential plan development, approval of the Forest Conservation Plan by DNEP, subdivision plat approval, which is now a recorded subdivision plat. The Forest Conservation Plan approval was reviewed on appeal by the Building Board of Appeals and sustained the Department of Neighborhood and Environmental Programs that the Forest Conservation Plan was appropriate and respectful of the forest assets in this project. And then finally, we're within a hair's breadth of receiving approval of the grading permit for the project. The justification attached to R22-16 also fails to mention that Parkside Preserve is specifically mentioned in the 2009 comprehensive plan on page 65. And it's mentioned because the comprehensive plan deals with the shortage to be seen in residential housing in the city over the next 15 years. And it talks about the fact that this project would help meet that need. Finally, I think the charter provision cited in that justification simply does not apply to the Parkside Preserve situation. And I've explained that to all of you in detail as we've met with you over the last couple of weeks. Finally, in my discussions with one of you, a question was raised about the appropriateness or validity even of the annexation process, which was done in this case by resolution. Attached to the materials I've given you are excerpts from the state law, the charter of the City of Annapolis, the code of the City of Annapolis, but perhaps most instructive is a piece from the Maryland Municipal League detailing how the annexation process is to be done, and that confirms that it's done by resolution. So I think the main point here, and I'll close with this. Resolution R22-16 calls upon the city to abrogate the operative development agreement for the Parkside Preserve project. It would require the owners to renegotiate that agreement by first going before the Planning Commission and then having that recommendation brought back to the council. I think that is, in the case of Parkside Preserve, unfair in the extreme. And I also believe that such action would be illegal and beyond the legislative powers of the City Council. Thank you.
Alderman Payne?
Thank you. When did you obtain the grading permit?
I said we're within a hair's breadth of obtaining. We don't have it yet.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Kirby?
Mr. Delavan, do you believe that Parkside is in violation?
Absolutely not.
There is no breach of contract?
No, I don't really know what you're referring to. I'll try to be more specific.
Well, I'm looking at this Adequate Public Facilities Mitigation Agreement,
Right.
dated May 1.
Right.
And I see under Section 5, breach or default, and I see some lines that clearly delineates if we feel you're in breach, it's our sole responsibility to allow you certain X number of time to fix the breach.
I understand. I'm sorry. Yes, there is a provision in that agreement that gives the developer the opportunity to cure in the event that the city determines or believes there's been some breach of the agreement. So if that's what you're referring to, yes, that's a critical element of the agreement.
Has anybody from the city said anything to the firm?
No, absolutely not. We've been working with the city for years to get the permits to, and of course, the development process is very complicated, as you know. You have to have approved plans before you can get a permit, then you post bonds, and you can actually then start construction. We're not quite at that juncture yet, but we've been working with the city for years to get there, and that means working with David Jarrell and the Department of Planning and Zoning and DNEP and every other city agency. So after all this time, we're progressing along. We're, as I said, very close to, we believe, those final approvals, plans being approved, et cetera. That would allow us to proceed.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Benjamin Rosenberg. I'm the chairman of Rosenberg Martin Greenberg. It's a law firm in Baltimore. Our offices are on 25 South Charles Street. And while it may be hard for you to believe, it's certainly hard for me to believe, I just celebrated my 47th anniversary as a member of the Maryland Bar. All of those years have been spent litigating matters in courts all over the state, and federal courts, and courts outside of the state. I'd like, with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to hand out a one-page memo that'll just briefly summarize my remarks tonight for you and for the council members. Thank you. And while I don't want to repeat anything that Mr. Feldman or Mr. Mayers or Mr. Delavan said this evening, I would like to start out with a remark that Mr. Elson made in response to a question from Alderman Finlayson. And Mr. Elson said that because we don't have a grading permit and grading hasn't begun on the property, we are not vested. And I agree with Mr. Elson. Strictly from a land use perspective, this is not a vested situation. But this is not a land use matter. It's a matter of contract. It's a matter of the city's word being pledged to my client and my client's word being pledged to the city. And if this legislation passes, if you pass this legislation, you will have permitted a breach of that series of agreements between the city and my client to occur. The legislation, as Mr. Delavan noted in his remarks, is based not on a faulty premise, but on a false premise. There is no 10-year requirement that the council and the mayor take another look at agreements that have already been entered into between the city and the developer. That's the entire premise of this legislation with regard to Parkside Preserve, and it's false. There is no such requirement in the charter, and in my view, as a lawyer with the years of experience that I've had, this is really not a difficult case if it comes to the imposition of this legislation by the council in these circumstances. There are no time requirements, 10 years, 1 year, 20 years, 15 years, for a second look at agreements already entered into in the charter. There simply aren't any. But by enacting this legislation, the council would be calling into question the following enactments by the city and agreements between the city and the developer. The first is resolution number R3705. It was adopted February 13, 2006, which annexed this property to the city of Annapolis. The next is ordinance number 03805, which was adopted February 13, 2006, which laid out a zoning classification of R1B for the property. The next is the original public facilities agreement, dated October 25, 2006, between the city and the developer, which relates to water, sewer, roads, sidewalks, street lighting, waste removal, and other municipal services, and addresses how each will be considered during the development process. But most importantly is the adequate public facilities mitigation agreement entered into between the city and the developer on May 1st, 2012. And the reason that that agreement is so important is that it provides for the developer to ensure, either by building facilities that are acceptable to the city for sewer and water, and or providing adequate security to make sure that those facilities will be built. And this is why that agreement is so important. That agreement cannot be implemented, legally cannot be implemented until the developer is issued a grading permit by the city. So in other words, the ability of the developer to comply with the agreement lies in the hands of the city of Annapolis. Now look, I can give you a law school lesson on all the legal doctrines that are applicable to this situation, but it's not necessary. It's just plain common sense. You can't say someone is not performing a contract when your own action is what's preventing that person from performing the contract. And that's exactly what enactment of this legislation would mean. So, I urge you, whatever has to be done in order to take this legislation off of your agenda, whether it's withdrawn, whether you have a vote on it, and you vote it down, I can't and would never presume to tell you what to do. But I can say this: given the enormous effort and expense that this developer has gone to up to this time, which is detailed in the chronology that Mr. Delavan, I believe, referred to, which is in the packet of materials that you've had, it is not possible for the developer to simply say, we're done. So if we can't get it resolved here, the alternative, which, believe me, I have spent more time talking clients out of litigation than talking them into it. But if that's what it has to be, that's what it's going to be. It will be a suit for damages, for injunction, for declaratory relief, whatever is required in order to get this property where it should be, which is literally on the cusp of construction. So I think that's all I have to say, unless anybody has any questions. Thank you very, very much.
The final two speakers are Tony Zapata and Aileen Powers.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Tony Zapata. I'm the administrator for Iglesia Hispana Emmanuel Church, located in the city of Annapolis on 913 Cedar Park Road. The mayor already knows, and that church, he has been there with us. Our church has been growing, and we have over 700 members in our church. Our congregation is so large that we had to have 4 different services on Sunday to accommodate them all. The members of our congregation have many types of jobs. Among them, we have local firefighters and teachers in our congregation. Our church has followed closely the plans of Parkside Preserve and Annapolis Neck Road just off of Forest Drive. Among the reasons why we have followed this particular development is because it's located in the city. Our church is here. It's within walking distance of necessary convenience shoppings like giant pharmacies and the giant shopping convenience centers. And in addition to this, the property is located close to the park, Quietwater Park. The two other matters that interest us as well is that the property will offer 19 units that will be affordable housing. It's very difficult to find affordable housing in the city of Annapolis. It's also difficult to find affordable housing that is new within walking distance of convenient shopping in a beautiful park. Lastly, the property is of interest because of the public transportation line. The bus is just within sight of the property. The convenience and the affordability of this particular project are things that the members of our church are very interested in. We have watched the development of this project, and we're anxiously looking forward to the time where our members have the opportunity to purchase a home and live in this project. I will also point out that the project will bring jobs to our community, as well increase the tax base to the city of Annapolis. These are things which not only benefit our church community, but benefit the greater Annapolis community as well. Also, I want to say to the council members, don't let yourself be intimidated. God had appointed you to be in that chair. Community is people, not just trees. So I've been in Annapolis for 24 years, and I've seen this city that has been very good to me grow. And I see grow my kids in here to be public servants in this community. So I thank you for your time.
If there's anyone else from the public, now is your opportunity.
Good evening, Janet Norman, 787 Annapolis Neck Road in Ward 7. I appreciate the sentiments of many that have spoken tonight. I am very appreciative of the developer's actions to hook up my elderly neighbors to the sewer system when their septic system was failing terribly, and get that taken care of. One thing I'd like to remind you of is that yes, this is a business decision for all of them, and I hope that the city can be fair to the business decision that they have undertaken. But these 152 structures are not just structures. They are homes that we are hoping to make a livable, viable neighborhood. I'm the only one in this entire room that actually lives within this annexed portion. This is not like many of the other annexations of the city where they annexed an empty property. Here, existing residents of the county were annexed into the city without their consent or vote, because they had a sufficient number under the law. So please consider the needs of the existing residents and the needs mostly for transparency. Apparently, a modified public utilities agreement was signed between the city and a lawyer. That would be great if the residents who live there and will be affected by this modified agreement could be involved in the drafting of that agreement and receive copies of it afterwards. I've tried to pay attention and come to every single planning commission and city council where this was brought up over the past 10 years, and it's very difficult to get the information and be considered part of this. They didn't just annex an empty parcel, they annexed people's lives who are already here. And I've mentioned to you before the need for recreational facilities. Why can't the existing residents and other vested people in our community have a input on what recreational facilities will be put into our neighborhood? Previously, it was just indicated that, well, Quiet Waters Park is, half a mile away. If you walk from my house to the playground, it's about half a mile. And I let my kids roam. They're big, huge boys, but they've been chased out of the field there by heroin dealers. So people want to have on-site facilities where their kids can play and where they can play safely, and they can see them, and the kids can pop back inside if it's dinner time. So it's really important to have community features that make it a community, like Hunt Meadow has, like Hillsmere has. They have places where you can play together and meet your neighbors and be a real community. I've told you before, my son's first day at Annapolis Middle School 6 years ago, I asked him how his day went and what his observations were, and he said to me, well, most of the kids are overweight. So are we designing another development? Kind of like if you've been in Annapolis Overlook, you know that there's no place for a kid to throw a ball that's not in the street. I measured it. There's an electrical box, and there's about 27 feet of grass outside the electrical box, and that's the only place to play. So how are we designing this, and how are we including the input of the citizens who live there and of the kids who are going to be going to school here and walking to their schools and walking safely and learning to drive safely? How are we including all these people? I'd like to get a copy of everything Mr. Delavan has submitted to you, because I sure would like to have that information. My first notice that we had been annexed was getting a city property bill with no notification, just here it is, here's your increased tax rate. So I hope that the residents can be more involved, and that you will have our input into the amenities that need to go in here. Just saying, here's a pot of money, a homeowners association will take care of it, is not sufficient. We want to be involved in helping design our own community that nobody else is going to be stuck living in. And I would urge you to get very promptly the light on Forest Drive that's going to be needed prior to the construction trucks going in and out and moving slowly. Pulling out into 55-mile-an-hour traffic with a slow-moving construction truck is a recipe for another shutdown. Thank you very much.
My name is Anastasia Hopkinson. I live at 1036 Harbor Drive. And just a little bit about the history of this project. It really should have been completed years ago, but when it was first presented to the city, it was so out of proportion to what should be developed there. By the time it got to the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission, which has never disapproved a project, approved this one with a remarkable, unprecedented 49 conditions. That went forward to the Board of Appeals, which denied the project. The builder appealed to Circuit Court, and that took, I think, about a year or so to go, or more to go through Circuit Court. This project would have been completed had it not been just so huge. It shouldn't be that big. It still shouldn't be that large. And we're now in Circuit Court dealing with trying to protect some of the forest in the southwest corner from being destroyed. So the burden falls on the developer who has presented something to the city 10 years ago that it was just too large for the 40-acre area development that was possible. And it is not the fault of the city, nor any other person, that this project has taken this long. They've brought themselves to this point by their own action. I hope the city takes an opportunity to give the Planning Commission a chance to review the project appropriately with what, within the law, but with what is important for to be reviewed by the Planning Commission at this point in time, where so many conditions have changed. Thank you.
Rob Savage, 12 Windwhisper Lane. First thing I want to say is, just to be clear, I've never advocated to stop this project entirely. I don't want this project stopped entirely. What I've advocated for is simply more responsible development, essentially, more protection of the forest and the wetlands. So that said, I do realize that this has nothing to do with the forest, and I'm certainly not an attorney, but I can simply comment on what I've read. So I read the annexation agreement that I had access to, and it seems like it is in breach. I mean, it says in the annexation agreement that no construction permits, including grading, shall be issued without prior construction and acceptance of public water and sewer connections. I mean, unless this has been updated, I haven't seen the revised agreements. This is just the most recent that I saw. They also mention, let's see, recreational assets. It says the plan and zoning director is supposed to work with the Rec and Parks director to get some recreational assets on the property, and they specifically mention ball fields and that kind of thing, and I don't really know if that's ever been looked at all by the city, because right now there aren't any recreational assets. I know that's one of the criticisms of the project. And also I just want to mention the traffic component. The agreement also mentions Forest Drive improvements need to be funded and scheduled prior to development approval. And again, I mean, this is important because we're at the 11th hour now. They're reviewing grading permits, and like they said, it could be approved, who knows, tomorrow. But presumably, it seems like these agreements haven't been met. Like, what are the implications of that? And maybe, so in that sense, maybe you don't even need a new agreement, just simply enforce this one. But I think the benefit of having revisiting the agreement is to make sure the traffic impact studies are done looking at the current traffic load and the current development footprint. Because I'm not sure exactly when these studies were done, but this agreement's, it's 10 years old now. Things have changed. And lastly, I just want to follow up, piggyback on what Anastasia said. I know they like to sort of blame the city for a lot of the delays in the project, or city staff. And I just want to stand up for city staff and reiterate the point that the proposals submitted by the developer were often very unrealistic. The first few submissions were very dense, didn't take into any consideration the environmental laws in the city, and so staff had to keep pushing back and pushing back. And the developers were very resistant to that, and that always creates a delay. But that, again, is not the fault of the city. I mean, the one thing I think might be the fault of the city would be the Forest Conservation Act approval, but that, again, is something completely separate. So that's it. I encourage you to maybe consider using the clause that Alderman Kirby brought up to cite that they are in breach of the contract. Then you can make sure they enforce some of these provisions and get some of the new ones on the record. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public who would like to speak on this issue? Seeing no movement, I declare the public hearing on R-2216 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, next is a public hearing on another annexation, Rogers property, and relating to the same issue, their public facility agreement status.
Alan Hyatt is the only person signed up to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alan Hyatt on behalf of A&R Properties, which is the developer of this site. First of all, Rogers is misspelled. It's R-O-D-G-E-R-S. And you may know this property. This is the last remnants of this Carr Sparrow Beach property. A&R is Adams and Rogers. Adams is Willie Adams. Rogers is Theo Rogers. They've been in the community for many, many, many years. This property was annexed in 2005. There was a public facilities agreement executed in September 2006, recorded on September 7th, 2006. So the effective date of that resolution is September 7th, 2006, when the public facilities agreement was recorded. So the 10 years hasn't expired. You know, the illusory 10 years that's referred to in the preamble here, because as every speaker, every attorney who's reviewed the charter has told you, and I hope you believe it by now, that just doesn't make any sense, that Article 3 of the charter, at least the interpretation that has been made prior to Mr. Elson. This property is a little bit different because it has gone through, or it's in the process of getting approved for a planned development. We're seeking 40 townhouses on this site. And in this public facilities agreement, there's the exact same language that's in the Catherine Properties public facilities agreement. It says that if a property, if a dwelling was occupied on the effective date of the resolution, then it was supposed to connect to public facilities within 1 year. That's what it says, within 1 year. I can tell you that there's never been a request to connect to public facilities because the expectation is that public facilities are connected when the development takes place. That's what goes on. That's the custom. That's the history. Why connect to one house? There happens to be one house on this property that is occupied, but it has not connected. So how do we resolve this? Not going through this rigmarole, but very simply, I'm certain that the property owner would agree, and I would think the city would agree to extend it a couple of more years. That's all you have to do on a deal like this. Extend the date a couple of years, and when the project is ultimately approved, there'll be a connection to public facilities. And that's what I ask on a deal like this. There's no reason to go and refer this back to the Planning Commission and make these evaluations, because again, I do say that the preamble here is faulty. The 2009 comprehensive plan considered this property. There's no reason to do anything other than make a deal between the city and the property owner to amend it. Otherwise, I suspect the city's going to end up in a lot of legal hot water on all these matters that's before them. Thank you.
If anyone else would like to speak, now's your opportunity.
Thank you. Rob Savage, 12 Winchester Lane. I'll be brief on this one. I just wanted to make a point, and I'm not saying this because I expect this to be a driving factor in your decision, but I just think it's something that could be of importance. So this property, like you said, was, I guess, Carr's Beach, which I believe was one of the African-American beaches. So I think essentially it's sort of like a public beach, and I think it'd be nice to preserve that kind of public access. And I know the annexation agreement does mention basically a suggestion to the developer that they should consider public access, because it'd be pretty significant. It'd be the first public access for the city for the Chesapeake Bay. You know, not necessarily a big, large boats, but I think it'd be nice to have at least a small, light boat launch, something like that in this community, just to sort of go with the tradition of having this be sort of open to the public. So, again, I don't expect this to be a driving factor, but just wanted to let you know, if this does get revisited, perhaps that's something that can be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no motion, I declare the public hearing on R24, 16 closed. R23, 16 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, another public hearing on R2416 regarding additional annexation resolutions for other annexed properties in the city.
Mr. Hyatt is the only person signed up to speak.
Alan Hyatt, 200 Westgate Circle. I thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'll try not to be redundant, but this 2416 could be the most egregious of the bunch of the annexation resolutions because it goes back to annexations that took place in 1987. So why is it that we go back in history to try to evaluate the impact on annexations that took place in 1987? What could possibly be the point of that? Because all of the annexations enumerated under 2416 consist of land. So there's no connection to city facilities because there's nothing to connect to. Some are in the stage of proceeding for development applications. Some of that land is just sitting. So, it just doesn't make any sense. And all these properties were analyzed for the 2009 comprehensive plan. They were considered. You don't have to go back and reevaluate these. And as I sent to you earlier, I handed out that exhibit. The city has grown through annexations. And it's interesting that in the past, the resistance to annexations came from the county, came from Anne Arundel County. And I don't know, I'm sure some of you remember, but in the early 80s, when the Wimbledon Farm was annexed, that became Hunt Meadow. And Anne Arundel County adopted a law that allowed it to put to referendum to the entire county whether land could be annexed into the city of Annapolis, and the whole county voting role had the opportunity to participate. Well, the then city attorney challenged that, and the court ruled that, hey, you can't do that. And so they rejected that law. And the county 2 or 3 times over the years has tried to interfere with annexations. Well, in the last several annexations, we haven't heard from the county at all, and it sort of comes from within. And I'm not quite sure what is driving it because, I would say that it's important to the city to grow both geographically and economically. Some of you may not see that, but I hope you step back and take a look at that exhibit because that's how the city grew. And it's ironic that in today's newspaper, I hope some of you read it, front page, Anne Arundel County is devoting its efforts and resources to develop in the West County. That's where the Hsu administration thinks growth should take place. Well, in this city, a lot of time and energy and effort went into the 2009 comprehensive plan, and there were several areas where the comprehensive plan directs growth toward. There's opportunity areas, Outer West Street, Upper West Street, along Forest Drive, West Annapolis, and instead of trying to implement that plan, we end up pushing back, we interfere with growth, and we come up with these resolutions that are costly, they don't make a lot of sense, and what happens is, by not implementing the plan, we drive up the cost of housing in this community, we drive up the cost of living in this community, it becomes more difficult to meet a budget, and we're not doing what we should do, economically speaking. So I urge you to take a long, hard look at these resolutions. I think they should be defeated. And in the couple of cases where you have public facilities agreements, if there's a disagreement on somebody's performance, then sit down between the city and the property owner and see if you can't work it out. Certainly in the case of Rogers, that's an easy one to resolve. So I thank you for hearing me 3 times tonight, and sorry it's so late for everybody, and hope we have a cooler session next time.
Anyone else like to testify?
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. Hi, my name is Anastasia Hopkinson, 1036 Harbor Drive with the Annapolis Neck Peninsula Federation. And in response to Mr. Hyatt, I just want you to consider that when these annexations occurred, even back to '87, this land is undeveloped, and we're talking about development that will burden the schools, burden the roads, possibly burden water supplies. And it has to be reconsidered at this point. You have the legal right to do that. They're in a breach of a contract, as Mr. Rosenberg admitted. And so, take the opportunity. Their annexation of municipalities is very controversial, and that is why the county pushed back on it. Not because they don't want to see the city of Annapolis prosper. That would be delightful. Instead, they push back on it because of the financial burden it places on public facilities, roads and schools, notably. The county is very burdened by the city's development. There's no denying that. The fixes to Forest Drive are in the tens of millions of dollars, and they're just not feasible. So what we're stuck with is diminished property values because we cannot improve our schools, we cannot improve our roads. So take the opportunity you've got now to revisit this contract, and let's see how we can improve upon it. Thank you, Mr. Hyatt.
Is there anyone else? I now declare the public hearing on R-2416 closed. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Mr. Mayor, next is, that's the end of public hearings, and next is legislative action on second reader. The first resolution to be considered is R-3115 regarding rental unit licenses for the purpose of waiving fees associated with licensure and inspection of HACA residential rental units.
Is there a motion to withdraw R-3116 on second reader?
I'll move to withdraw.
Is there a second?
For what?
To withdraw?
I'd like to speak to it.
Sure.
I sponsored this legislation when the city decided, wisely so, to inspect all of our rental units, including those in public housing. What concerned me was the fact that we were then going to turn around and charge the very agency who is struggling to maintain some semblance of quality residences in the city. That bothered me considerably. And so this legislation was poised to waive the fees that we would charge the housing authority for those inspections. I've since been assured by the city manager that there is no intention for the city to charge the housing authority for these inspections. And I've also been informed by the previous city attorney that it's probably unconstitutional to waive the fees because being poor is not a protected class. But again, I've been assured by the city manager. I saw the city finance director perk up when I said this, but the city manager has assured me that there will not be any fees or any charges to the housing authority. So for that reason, I'm going to withdraw this legislation.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Mayor, I do want to raise a question of whether or not the city manager has the power to forgive those fees. I think that's going to have to be an issue that we're going to have to explore.
I agree.
Then I would ask that you go back and investigate what it will take for me to be able to alleviate the burden on the housing authority. Because if there's another legislative action that needs to take place, then I'm willing to do it.
Mr. City Attorney, can you please present the next item?
The next item under legislative action is related to Ordinance 08-16 and Resolution 02-16.
Is there a motion to postpone 0816 on second reader until July 25th, 2016?
So
Second.
moved.
It's moved and second. Is there any discussion?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Next on the agenda, Mr. Mayor, on second reader is the charter amendment 2-16, amending the city's maximum
Excuse me, Mr.
I think
Mayor.
you skipped R216.
We skipped R216.
R2-16, I apologize, regarding peddlers, hawkers, and itinerant merchants' fees and fines legislation.
Is there a motion to postpone R02-16 on second reader until July 25th, 2016?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Okay, next, Mr. Mayor, is the charter amendment I was referring to, 2-16, which proposes to amend the city's maximum penalty applicable to municipal infractions, citations, misdemeanors, and violations to that prescribed by state law.
Is there a motion to adopt CA 216 on second reader?
So moved.
Second. We have one amendment, and that is the Rules Committee proposed amendment, and I'll let the sponsor speak to it this time.
Rules Committee?
Someone from the Rules Committee? I'll read it out loud for the good of the group. It's Amendment 1. It says on page 2, line 11, strike in the... Oh, remove discretion of, and then strike an ordinance. And it basically should say, the City Council may impose fines in cooperation or other penalties or remedies as permitted by law. I'll struggle reading that because there's not spaces between words. So I guess, is there any discussion on the amendment?
Did we move it? I'll move it.
All right, all in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Is there a motion to adopt CA 216 as amended on second reader?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, there are 3 amendments. Did we just vote on all 3 of them?
I only had one.
Okay, there's 3 pieces to it. Okay. It's one amendment, but there were, you
There's
only
3
read
pieces to
one.
it, yes.
There were 3 different parts, so you were talking, okay.
Was it seconded? All right.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Madam City Clerk, would you please... Oh, is there a motion to adopt on third reader?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Panalidi.
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Aye.
Alderman Littman. Alderman Kirby.
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Alderman Arnett. Alderman Bud.
Aye.
Alderman Payon.
Aye.
Alderwoman Pendle Charles.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present our next item?
Next, on second reader is ordinance 09-16 involving the process for removing members of boards and commissions.
Is there a motion to adopt 0916 on second reader?
So moved.
Is there a second? All right, we have 3 amendments. We have the rules proposed amendments, the Budge Arnett proposed amendments, and the Littman proposed amendments. And we'll take them in order. So if the Rules Committee would like to speak first.
Whether the latter 2 sets of amendments undo the amendments that the Rules Committee...
If I may, Mr. Mayor, if we do the amendments in order as the mayor has read them out, it will work out correctly.
Okay.
When we last visited this this legislation, the council voted to adopt the Rules Committee amendments and the Budge Arnett amendments, and then we paused and postponed so that the Rules Committee could consider the Littman amendments. And so we're now back doing it again. So the Rules proposed amendments are first at bat. I'll move them if, on behalf of the...
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. The next is the Budge Arnett amendment.
So moved.
All right. Any discussion?
Aye.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The third is the Littman amendments. Is there a motion to adopt? So moved. Second?
I request we take these individually as opposed to as a group.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'm withdrawing amendment number 1. I'm just moving forward number 2 and 3.
All right. Give me
And
1 second to let this come up.
Let them catch up.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm moving just 2 and 3, so I'm asking for a second on amendments 2 and 3 combined.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. Amendment number 3.
We just did 2 and 3.
That's it.
Oh, that's it?
2 and 3.
All right.
That's it.
Is there a motion to adopt O-1916 as amended on second reader?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
O-916. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Is there a motion to adopt O-916 on third reader?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panalidi.
Aye.
Alderwoman Finley.
Aye.
Alderman Littman.
Aye.
Alderman Kirby.
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
Aye.
Alderman Budge.
Aye.
Alderman Payon.
Aye.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Next is R-01-16 relating to comprehensive maritime review.
Is there a motion to adopt R-116 on second reader?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. We have 2 proposed amendments, the Economic Matters proposed amendments and the Rules proposed amendments. And I'll let the Chair of Economic Matters speak to those now.
Mr. Mayor, with regard to the First Amendment, it was, well, the way the ordinance read, the proposed ordinance said before the end of May of 2016, we need to consider it until after May of 2016. We simply changed the wording to on or before May 15th, 2016. I don't really remember that it was 2016 we put there, but I think we're covered by on or about. Let's see.
Doesn't make any sense.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry. You know, we did this so long ago, Mr. Mayor, given the hour. I'm not sure this correctly reflects what we did, but or what I thought we did.
The Rules Committee has an amendment that goes over top of that, and all we did was change the date that it would commence to July 15th because we know we weren't even going to have this passed in May, so there was no way it could commence
That's
in May.
what I thought we did also.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
we did.
So,
And I'll be honest with you, Mr. Mayor, with regard to Amendment 2, I do generally remember that our passing or adopting Amendment 2 for recommending it to the council, but
it's just asking for a report,
Yeah.
periodic report.
I mean, I don't remember why we thought a report was necessary,
The
but
Planning
that's all.
Commission thought it was necessary.
Okay, the Planning Commission thought it was necessary. I honestly don't remember why, and I don't have any notes in front of me.
Or would you say, is there a motion to adopt the 2 amendments, take them as a group?
So moved.
Second.
for the two for economic matters, Amendment 1 and Amendment 2.
I
It's
agree.
changing the date.
Do I have the authority to withdraw the
You do,
amendment?
yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Before you do so, may I speak to it?
Sure.
Amendment 1 inserts a language speaking to the date on which the study will begin or commence. And then it strikes the language that says the study will be completed by May of 16.
Yeah, okay.
So it's a two-parter. Putting in language to say it'll start by May, and then getting rid of the stuff that would say it was done yesterday.
That makes sense.
Aye.
So as the sponsor of the amendments, how would you like to proceed?
Look, I agree with our member's explanation for it. I haven't been provided with the usual notes tonight, and understandably not complaining. And that would be generally what I recommend.
Yeah, I was about to say I wasn't sure about that. So what is the motion on the floor? I'm trying to remember.
Are you moving your amendment number 1?
The amendment goes, number 1 goes to when we start the study,
Right.
not
Right.
to when it's complete.
Right.
Which I stand by
And
that.
yes.
I stand by that at this point.
Okay.
So I would ask that they both be considered in one vote at this point.
Oh, so you consider it both? He moved amendment 1 and 2.
I don't think we have any completion date in there. It's simply a start date and a
I think-
reporting date every
Let's let
6
the
months.
Director of Planning and Zoning chime in here. Mr. Gutwald?
I think if you look at the two sets of amendments, the one from the Rules Committee or the Economic Matters Committee that says strikes May and adds July, that takes care of Amendment 1 from the other committee that struck on or beginning on May. So you need to get rid of the one that says the beginning dealing with May.
The Rules Committee amendment comes along and modifies this and changes May to July.
Right.
But you still have to have the language changes that turn it from a finish by to a commence by date.
Oh, right. Okay.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So to sum it up, we got to vote for these two amendments and the two amendments in the rules.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So with that being said,
Fred moved amendment for economic matters 1 and 2. Wasn't
All right.
second yet.
So
Mr.
ultimately,
Mayor, I apologize to you and my colleagues, but when you're chairing a meeting, it's very difficult to follow the discussion and take notes at the same time. And usually, our clerk does a wonderful job at providing us with notes, and she was off last week, and I totally understand why we don't have them tonight, and I apologize. It won't happen again.
no need. It's a late hour and we're all hot, so
Yeah.
it's wearing us down. So there's been a motion. I just need a second for amendments 1 and 2.
second. Yeah, I think, I second.
All-
The sense is we want to have a proper commencement date, and we'd like to have periodic reporting. So that's
Yeah.
the thrust of all of these amendments. I think Joe is right, we have to clean up
Yes.
Yes.
by passing the economic matters, and then if we pass the rules, that will get the date the start date even closer to reality.
So with that said, there's no other discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Let our
The ayes
people
have
vote,
it. Now we're going to go to the next set of amendments.
Which is the
Rules Committee.
Rules
Yes,
Committee
you're up.
that just...
You're on deck.
We're
Go.
simple, we just changed starting in May to starting in July.
Sold. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt O19? No, hold wait.
Well,
Is there a motion to adopt R0116
Yeah.
as amended on second reader?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Is
So that's the vote.
Jared said no. I'm reading the third reader
Oh,
now.
sorry.
Is there a motion to?
No. Third reader on that.
All right. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mayor Panlady.
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Aye.
Alderman Littman.
No.
Alderman Kirby.
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
Aye.
Alderman Budge. Aye. Alderman Payon.
Aye.
Alderman Pendle Charles.
Aye.
Thank you.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, would you please present the next item?
Next, Mr. Mayor, is consideration of Resolution 09-16, which would allow for the representation for city representation at public safety employee funerals.
Is there a motion to adopt R916 on first reader, or on second reader?
So moved.
Is there? All right. We have two set of amendments, one from the Public Safety Committee and one from the Rules Committee, and I'll let the sponsor from the Public Safety speak to it.
Our amendment. We have one amendment on page 1, line 24, and it's repeated on line 44 and on page 2, line 4, to strike shall and replace with may.
All right. Any discussion?
Discussion. Yeah, well, Mr. Mayor, I think right now, any of us, if we pick up a newspaper and decide to go to a funeral, we can do that. That's made. The purpose of the legislation was to put some sort of responsibility there, whereas I guess the second agreement deals with another issue other than the word shall. But as far as may, I think we can do that right now. Any and everybody is able to do that unless it's a closed funeral. So it gives no teeth at all right now to the legislation as written. So I would be opposed to it.
Alderman Payan?
Mr. Mayor, one of the problems is that our retired police officers, I mean, once they stop working here, they're free to go anywhere in the country. I mean, Florida is like the all-time home of retired police officers at some point. I don't know that we can afford to send a representative down there or to any other state every time somebody dies. I'm not saying they don't deserve that, but it gets expensive, and I don't know if we can pay for it. There's no reference to any geographic area here, and I don't think there should be, but I just don't think making us do that is appropriate under the circumstances.
Alderman Littman?
Thank you. Just to expound on that point, not only can a retired officer move anywhere in the country, but they can move anywhere in the world. And the same concerns would apply if we have someone living in Australia and passes through the natural order of things. I don't know that we want to commit ourselves to paying for a representative from our police department going.
Alderman Kirby?
Yeah. In all reality, my intent for this piece of legislation was to deal with funerals in our local geographic area. I think we're reaching to think that we're going to send a police representative to France because somebody has succumbed to their illnesses. In all likelihood, we could probably get them a citation there or anywhere else in the continental United States other than in the state of Maryland. Even in Western Maryland, if we could get a citation out there, that's just fine. And I'm amenable to any of those amendments. My intent here was not to make us spend a lot of money. Simply, I've sat through a couple of funerals and there was no representation there. And I believe that the caucus has asked us to do some things that we were able to do. So.
Mr. Mayor, could we ask Captain Howard to speak to it, to speak to practice now? And while she's preparing to speak, I would welcome an amendment from the maker of this legislation. If you would like to amend it to say local, then I would withdraw, or at the discretion of the committee. But, Captain.
we now have policy in reference to attending police funerals. I've been a part of the Honor Guard for 25 years as an officer, supervisor, now commander of the team. Our policy states now that if we have manpower, we send them. There has not been many times we were not represented at a funeral. If we were not represented, it was as an honor guard, it was simply because of staffing. To mandate to say that we have to be at a funeral can cause issues in several ways. First of all, the honor guard unit itself is not standalone. The honor guard unit itself is not standalone. I spoke before with Chief, expounding on something that Chief Christie was speaking on some time ago in reference to our officers being trained, and I spoke on how the officers are trained to do other things because they have to multitask. That's the same with the honor guard unit itself. It's not a standalone unit. Our honor guard members come from patrol, from the SWAT team, from special ops. So to mandate that they have to attend a funeral can cause issues such as staffing shortage. We would have to pay overtime and order someone in. It would just cause issues. Our policy, we have a policy that mandates to say that we're going to represent and how people can request, especially the family, if it's a line of duty death or outside agency death. We have policy in reference to requesting. As long as I've been a member of the Honor Guard, I can only account for a handful of times where we were not able to represent as an Honor Guard. And in that place, now that being a supervisor, now commander, I extend that out to officers to go and represent the city, to represent the department and city itself, not necessarily as an Honor Guard. So we make every effort to make sure that we're represented. But I think if you mandate, it will cause issues and it's going to cost us more money.
Mr. Mayor, again, I don't know where we're getting these honor guards. I have, this legislation does not speak to an honor guard as written. I mean, where does it come from? It does not speak to an honor guard. It simply asks that it can go three ways with me. It can say shall, or it can say we should. I just don't, I think right now with may being that pivotal word, we already can do that. But as far as being a local jurisdiction, my intent here again is not to cost the city or the department money. I just think an officer who puts on a uniform and is befelled sometime after duty or during the act of duty should be honored. Somebody should be there. The president cut a trip short to go to Texas for 5 people tomorrow. No expense involved. He's going to be there. He wasn't asked to go there. He can't be made to go there. It's his choice to go there because he thinks it's the best and the right thing to do for the country. That's the leadership. And all I'm asking is, as a city, we represent our officers. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think, in view of what Captain Howard has testified, all along I have questioned the appropriateness of this legislation, putting in code and binding the public safety departments to doing this seemed a little over the top to me. There already are processes in place. I think that the general spirit of the way we've been conducting our budget process and the other ways that we deal with the departments is to try to give them as much discretion to manage their own affairs as is possible. So I like the public safety may. I mean, this is going to go into code, and I think it is not going to mean a lot. Should, which is what the Rules Committee was offering, kind of gives a more affirmative notion that we really should honor our fallen public safety officers. But none of this has your local, non-local. I don't know whether it's appropriate for this to be withdrawn and have new I mean, I think it'd be appropriate to have a withdrawal period, and I told you that at lunch, but if it is going to have all these other things, I think it needs to go back and get amendments that say local. Then we're going to have to define what local is. I mean, I just think we're getting into a real rat's nest, particularly since there's already a process in the public safety. And I know Chief Stokes has said there's already a process in fire. So, I don't know. I'm very uncomfortable with this legislation.
Alderman Budge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think one thing that Alderman Arnett needs to realize is this is a resolution. It does not put anything in code. So it's reflecting the sense of the council. I'm a supporter of the wording of the Rules Committee amendment in using the word should instead of may. I think that may is way too weaselly, and as Alderman Kirby says, we can do that. We can do that now. Were we to substitute the word should, it reflects the expression of the council that is our preference that we be represented at these services, but it allows at the same time the department the flexibility to deal with staffing and location and other logistical issues without us having to write a whole treatise on when you do and when you don't and everything else, because they've already done that. So we have on the floor right now the Public Safety Committee's amendment. I would suggest that perhaps we amend the amendment to say should instead of may and move on. Or I think that's the cleanest way, see if that'll work, and then if that doesn't work, we can come up with Plan B.
So to make sure, Alderman Littman.
Mr. Mayor, I move to amend the amendment to change the word shall to should, and to add after the words deceased employee's family, add the following: so long as the funeral is local and that attendance is feasible given the department's staffing needs.
All right. Alderman Pendell Charles.
Just curious. I have a question. I can't ask a question.
Well, I think to the point of
I'm
motion.
I'm just curious. What's the most extreme request we've ever had, if you can recall? I mean, have we ever gotten a request to go to Australia? Have we ever gotten a request for someone who's been on the 4 or 6 months? Or I'm just curious.
No.
That's just a curiosity question.
In the last few years, we've been able now to travel out of state, meaning we've gone to New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Delaware.
Okay. That's pretty much local.
They're not overnight stays.
Okay.
The guys leave out, come back that same day. So if you want to call that extreme, that would be the most extreme. And it hasn't been a request. It was a line of duty death where the honor guard wanted to go and had permission to go. I don't think we've ever had an extreme request.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we get requests that we can't fulfill because of the timeliness of it. The most recent one, I can't remember the guy's name because I didn't work with him. The family contacted us the day before the arrangements. It was not possible for us to get a team together the day before the arrangements. That's the only time we have an issue is with timeliness, is when we're notified. But other than that, we make every effort to make sure that we have representation at a funeral if we're requested.
So basically, as long as it's a day situation, they get there in one day.
A few days, when the family sits down to make the arrangement with the funeral director, that's the best time to contact.
No, I
us.
mean as far as travel time.
Yes.
One day,
Yes.
pretty much.
It's been just
Alderman
one day.
Lippman, what Captain Howard is saying, basically it's a one-day trip. They go up, they come back.
And none of that is encapsulated in this legislation. If we, as it stands now, regardless of all that, all of that is ignored as it stands now. They have to attend. day before you notice, got to attend.
Well, I guess that takes care of the should. I mean, the should takes care of that.
But even if you change it to should and you don't give any guidelines to what should means, there's going to be question over that. That's why I suggest the additional language of so long as the funeral is local and that staffing is feasible given the department's needs.
Mr. Austin, do you want to give some clarification?
No,
Thanks.
Let me just say
Go
this.
ahead,
before-
Alderman
even
Kirby.
before the
Go ahead.
clarity, because
Yeah.
this may do it and it may not. And I like everything about what Alderman Lippman has said about the legislation, with the exception of the legislation is written to remove anyone having to make that decision, whether it can be seen as biased or unbiased. I like it to stay local, but I also I didn't want anybody. I wanted to make it a completely unbiased piece of legislation. So I didn't want to leave it in the chief's hand, the deputy's hand, the mayor's hand. We just pass a piece of legislation. Somebody will be at that funeral. I'm not asking for an honor guard. That's not what the legislation says. And I don't know why we're here talking about honor guards. We're asking for representation at a funeral, a local funeral right now, because I'm amenable to that. And I'm amenable to should and shall.
Let's have the city attorney, because he's been waiting patiently.
Thank you. First of all, I do agree with Alderman Budge. This is not a law, it's not an ordinance, it's a resolution, and as he said, it just expresses the sense of the council, and so shall is not appropriate. Shall sort of is like, equates to a law. This is simply a policy. And so what I would suggest, to make it easier, is just that we add, that we do should, and not may and not shall. Should, I think, is the right word, but just say if reasonable, or if reasonable giving staffing needs, or if reasonable giving staffing and other departmental needs, something like that. But I think the reasonable goes well with should. Should left alone sort of doesn't give any criteria. And if you want to just put in reasonable, that's good enough criteria, I believe.
Alderman Pan?
Mr. Mayor, it looks like we are down to an amendment to the amendment of the amendment. And it sounds to me like this needs to be rewritten, or in the alternative, we have a defined policy, is that correct?
Yes.
That the police department has with regard to these. As loyal as I am to the Annapolis Police Department, forget being on this council, but I've worked with these guys for over 30 years. I'm not sure I see the need for this, and if there is a need, I think the word may pretty much sums up everything that I've heard here tonight. And we ought to just keep it simple. It is a resolution. We got the message. The police department has gotten the message. And I think we ought to just go with what the Public Safety Committee has recommended and leave it at that, because we could be here till 11 o'clock tomorrow night thinking of situations that can occur. I mean, you know, what do you do with a guy who's been on the force for a year 60 years ago, and nobody even remembers he's been on the force except for, you know, the grieving widow? Under this, we're saying we should send a representative. We have to send a representative. It's not what Alderman Kirby has in mind, I don't think. It's not what any of us have to do, but we have to wrestle with the wording of ordinances when we vote on these things. And I think, you know, using the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, is the best one to use here. It's a resolution. We understand the police department, obviously, they have their own policy. They understand that if at all possible, they really ought to send somebody, and apparently they do. And I would ask that we drop the amendments except for the one from the Public Safety Committee, leave it at that, and, you know, let's take a vote.
I would just say in terms of procedure, we have to vote on an amendment before we can entertain other ones. And I believe the only one that's been proposed so far that we haven't talked about is the public safety one, which replaces shall to may. So that was seconded. Has it been moved and seconded?
I will,
There was not a second for it.
There was not a second. Anybody asked for a second?
Is-
Public safety?
to be shall.
I
Thank
just
you.
moved
Ross
it.
seconded.
Okay, then I second it.
All right.
Thank you.
What's been moved and second?
Well, the original amendment to
Instead of shall to no, that's rule.
No, should.
Strike shall and replace with may. But
all right. If we say that one more time, the original.
to strike shall and replace with may. However, from what I heard my colleague on the Public Safety Committee say and what my other colleague on the Public Safety Committee say, I think we will be in agreement to support the Rules Committee amendment, which uses the word
Should.
So would you like to withdraw this one and go directly to rules?
Yes, with the indulgence of my committee members.
So,
Yes.
all right. So then, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
No.
I don't know what I just
Let
voted
me
on.
explain it real quick.
that
So
you would
here's
support
what's
that?
happened. Here's what's happening. We have this legislation. The legislation says we're going to replace shall with may. At the the amendment says shall
Okay.
to may. At the discretion of the chair of the Public Safety Committee, she was willing to entertain the amendment from rules that say should. But since we have it on the floor, we can't automatically withdraw it. We have to vote it down so then it can go. And we just voted it up.
Move to reconsider then.
Thank you. No, move to
We gotta
reconsider.
reconsider.
Is there a second?
Second?
I said move to reconsider. Is there a second to reconsider?
Thank you.
All those in favor to reconsider say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Great. Now, since we're here, and let me just make this very clear, if you would like it to say should instead of may, you should vote no, and it'll go to the Rules Committee, which will change that. If you want to keep it the way it is,
Say what?
yes. If you want to keep it the way it is, then vote yes. I think there's a sense on everyone up here that we should vote no on
If
this.
we
Why can't we just withdraw our own amendment?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Alderman Pfeiffer, where are you going?
Yeah, where you going?
that's right. Okay, so
Can you please call the motion to vote on the planning commission's motion?
the planning commission.
Public safety.
Public safety.
And I was like, where did
Planning
planning
commission
commission come from? That's out of the blue.
So we're
So,
voting to
I've never
withdraw.
said this before, but everybody should vote no on this.
We're voting to withdraw the may or should.
Are we voting to reconsider? Don't
Let
we have
me
to
explain
vote
this
to
real easy.
reconsider?
We've already voted, it's been reconsidered.
Okay.
Right now, the amendment says, we are going to say, instead of shall, it'll go to may. I think there's a sense on everyone up here that we don't want that to happen. We want to use the word should.
Almost everyone.
Okay.
Almost
All right,
everyone,
okay.
with the
We wanted
exception
to
of
say
Alderman
should.
from the 8th Ward. So if we vote no on this, we can then very quickly move on to the rules amendment
Okay.
and replace shall with should. So I can indulge everybody. We will now vote. All those in favor, please say aye. All opposed?
No.
No.
Great, motion fails. You really want a roll call?
No.
All right.
Okay.
Now we're going on to the second amendment, the rules amendment. Is there a motion to adopt that?
So moved.
Is there a second? Pains me to say this. Any discussion?
Yes.
Oh.
Again, I make the motion to amend this amendment by adding at the end of family, so long as the funeral is local and attendance is feasible given the staffing's needs.
Alderman Pendle
Question.
Charles.
Mr. Ellison, give us something a little shorter with your reasonable word in there, please.
It was simply, I just shut down my computer here, but it was simply that adopting the language should
Okay.
And then right after that saying, if reasonable, or you could say, if reasonable given staffing needs.
That's my amendment. You don't like that?
Well, local could mean Annapolis, it could mean within the state, so local's a little broad too.
Why don't we say state of Maryland?
That's the intent. Captain Howard said they go to Delaware, Pennsylvania. Yes, it was seconded.
I like that.
Let's go to Alderman Payon.
Mr. Mayor, does that mean that we have to stop sending people to New York or Pennsylvania? I don't consider that to be local. Local is Annapolis, Anne Arundel County, somewhere within 20, 30, 40 miles. If anybody's listening, there's so many people talking right now that I don't know.
Please go on.
But what's reasonable mean? It's affordable?
No, it doesn't mean that.
Apparently, there's another discussion going on that I'm not a party to, Mr. Mayor.
Reasonable means if reasonable given staffing needs, so it just, you can,
But my
you
question was,
consider.
what does local mean? Do we have to stop?
I was responding to Sheila, but I do think that local is not specific enough, because it could mean within the state, within the city, within the tri-state area.
As I said, we
And
could be here till
reasonable
11 o'clock
is
tomorrow
is
night.
more specific? Reasonable
Excuse
is
me, I
more
thought I had the
specific?
No, if reasonable given staffing needs, because Captain Howard said that staffing needs are considered.
What's the maker of this legislation say?
Just point of order. Alderman Payon has the floor if you want to continue, Alderman Payon.
Thank
If we
you.
could all be
My-
respectful
I
one at
think
a time.
my point is being made as we speak. We could be here till 11 o'clock at night, tomorrow night, discussing details of this legislation. It needs to be reworked entirely, or we go back to keeping it as simple as we can, and that is use the word may. And should, reasonable, local, those all have so many definitions that we couldn't possibly write them all out,
Mr. Mayor,
given the nature of this.
I believe the word may, that portion of it has already been changed to should. That's the vote on the floor now is should, and Alderman Lippman has said given that it remains local, and that there is sufficient, I believe.
Alderwoman Pendel Charles.
And
I'm about to
feasible.
ask Siri how close local is
Feasible.
to get a good definition.
Well, if he uses the word feasible, I don't even think we have to define local, because if it's not feasible, even if it's in Baltimore, we won't send anybody. If we don't have $1.30 for somebody to get on a Baltimore bus, then we keep them home. But if the word feasible is instilled, it still works for me.
All right. Alderwoman Pendel
I
Charles.
have a question. Alderman Lippman, would a color guard or a representative be considered local if they went to New York, in your estimation?
I would not consider that local, but the contrary to the resolution is not excluded. It's saying that you should attend if it's local. If they also want to attend and it's not local, they have that authority. You're not excluding what's not local and what's not feasible.
Alderwoman Felicia.
It's all relative, really. Local, they go to Delaware now, they go to Pennsylvania now. Local is clearly not California or Florida. So I'm sorry, no offense to the Californian over here, but I think we should be very clear about one thing. This has nothing to do with not showing respect for our officers. This is just trying to put it in the confines of what we are able to do as a city. Because I don't want anybody listening thinking that we're having real issues with this. We're not.
Alderman Payon.
Why don't we keep it the way it is? We have a policy, our police department has a very viable policy, and let's leave it at that. And I agree totally with my colleague from Ward 4 that there's no disrespect isn't an issue here. They already go. I mean, you've heard her say that they go to everyone they can. And there have been very few that have been missed since this policy has been adopted. I would expect that to continue. I don't think there's any need for the legislation. We're going to end up getting more mixed up. It's not going to have the intent we want it to have.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, in all due respect, if the department's policy was sufficient, this legislation would have never been crafted. Obviously, it bothers at least one person around these DIs, and that's the reason it was crafted.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I think we're starting to go around in circles. I think we have an amendment on the floor. We have an amendment to the amendment on the floor. I think we should start picking them off with some votes here.
I think you have to make that motion once, before you can take up new business. Not
What's the amendment on the floor right now?
I honestly am not sure what the amendment on the floor right now is.
Okay, it's it. Alderman Lippman, what's the amendment on the floor right now?
To change the word shall to should, and add after the phrase deceased employee's family to add, so long as the funeral is local and attendance by the representative is feasible.
Can you say that one more time so everybody could hear it?
Yes.
So that the amendment is, the word shall is changed to should, and after the phrase deceased employee's family, the following is inserted, so long as the funeral is local and attendance by the representative is feasible.
All right. Did everybody get that? Anybody need it repeated? Any other discussion? All those... We need a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? No. The ayes have it. Is there a motion to adopt R906 as amended on second reader?
So moved.
Disposed of what others?
We did the Rules
We
Committee.
just did the Rules Committee.
The Rules Committee is should.
Yeah, it should. So one more time, is there a motion to adopt R0916 as amended on second reader?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Madam City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Panlady?
No.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Alderman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Lippman?
Aye.
Alderman Kirby?
Aye.
Alderman Pfeiffer?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
No.
Alderman Deloge?
Aye.
Alderman Payon?
No.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank
Mr.
you.
City Attorney, would you please present the next item on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I think at this point we're past 11 o'clock. We have one item left on the agenda. I think we have to get a motion to get through the next item.
Move that we extend beyond 11 o'clock.
There's been a motion to move past 11. Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. For cleaning up the last item on the agenda, Mr. City Attorney.
That was Alderman Pfeiffer, not me.
I heard.
want everybody to know.
So it's on the record.
So, Mr. Mayor, the last item on the agenda is consideration of the item that was put on the agenda earlier, Ordinance O-36-15 regarding adequate public facilities.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we continue this vote until July 25th.
Is there a motion to postpone until the second meeting in July?
George, just to me.
Oh, is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
The ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney,
Mr. Mayor, we're at adjournment now.
anything else for the good of the order?
Nope.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Meeting adjourned.
Night.